the interference of the how can I call it, the neighborhood watch making noise in the background there. So yes, it's a lovely afternoon here, and we are welcome to the first of our winter session webinars as conducted by the Nigerian Institute of Engineers, London, UK branch. And it couldn't have come at the best time for us to come together, at least to look at pressing issues, current issues involving engineering practice and engineering professionals as a whole. And we want to see it from that point of view of recent events. And this time around, we are not zeroing in on any particular event as such, but to open our eyes to a lot of things and see how we can glean some engineering experience from people who have been in the business for so long. Hence, we have this webinar coming up this afternoon, recent building collapse in Nigeria. We want to look at the information in terms of infrastructural implications. We want to look at causes. We want to look at mitigations. We want to look at impacts. And I just want to thank the participants for today's webinar, because they've come out of their own schedule. They've put it aside for the sake of NSE London UK branch. We really appreciate your presence. And I believe I'm going to hand over very soon to the coordinator for today's webinar, Dr. Pokuola, to give us through what we are going to be sharing. But before we do that, we need to let us know what the NSE London UK branch has been up to so far. We have been able to put our website together, and we will be letting everyone know what we have in store. I don't know if Engineer Chinedu has got the website for us to share as I talk at the moment, but if not, during the course of the webinar, we can get that sorted out for us. And also, we want to let us know that definitely we've been able to constitute executive committees. That will be coming out very soon. And we'll be having our AGM, and we'll be letting everybody know about what the AGM composition is going to be. But just for a taster of what you expect for this session, starting from this winter period going forward, we want to look at the implication of collapsed and failed structures. What are the impacts? Not the impacts only on the economy, but also the impact on the engineering profession as a whole. For those of us who have been in construction for so many years, we know that the number one priority in any construction is not the delivery, it's not the cost, it's about everyone getting back home to their family safely, health and safety, because it is gross negative impact if a health and safety on site is taken for granted. So in that same vein, that is what we want to tackle this afternoon. And I believe the guys who are going to do justice, they are well and able. They are well-seasoned professionals in that field. And I wouldn't want to kind of let the cat out of the bag. So I will hand over to Dr. Pokuola to introduce the guests and the panelists, and then let's get the ball rolling. Dr. Pokuola, can you do the health and safety moment before we continue? Let them know what the criteria are, and then over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my chairman. You're very, very welcome. What a beautiful day we have here in London, as we're speaking to you all the way from London, UK, NSE, London, UK branch. You're all welcome to be with us today. It's going to be an exciting, I could see 71 people on board already. By the time we kick the whole thing going, there'll be far, far more people. As you know, today is going to be a collection of quite a lot of things. We're going to be showing you things we've done. I know we've been very quiet for the last 2 or 3 months because we've been planning, we've been changing things, we've been establish ourselves or reformatting ourselves, as you want to call it, rebranding ourselves. And all those brands will come out today, what we've been doing. But at the same time, we've been doing a lot of collaboration over the summer. We had a lot of collaboration with Kaduna branch, Ikeja branch, Buhari branch, Glasgow branch, Manchester branch, Houston branch, and most of all, the APWEN, the Association of Professional Women engineers in Nigeria. And I could see the president here, Engineer Ojelade, with us today. Thank you very much. We've been doing some wonderful things with them. And my chairman will tell you a little bit more. He may even show you some pictures of how we've managed to sponsor 10 females, through technical education. See, that's one thing that our point has been doing for a year, and we realize it's a good initiative. So we collaborate with them, we partner with them to sponsor 10 beautiful girls in technical education. So that's what we've been doing, and that's what we've been doing quite. But today we're up again. We wanted to showcase, wanted to discuss, wanted to come together and find out what is going on in terms of building collapse, what people's views on it, and we've put some fantastic panel of engineers together. People who are working in this area, people who are very, experienced in all these things. And we're going to be introducing them. But before we do that, let me introduce my co-presenter. It's part of our partnership. We have Engineer Atinuke Wuruola Owolabi from Ikeja branch that is going to be co-moderating the event with me today. Engineer Atinuke, do you want to say a word or two before we move on?
Thank you, Dr. Pokola, and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome you to this webinar of this afternoon. It's a great thing that we engineers are coming together to brainstorm on how to move our society forward and how to move the entire country and the country forward. I want to appreciate you all for coming, and I believe that the session is going to be very impactful and insightful as well. Please stay tuned as we go on. Thank you all.
Right, thank you very much there, Engineer Owolabi. You're very much welcome. We have about 8 people speaking today. I have our guest speaker, who's Engineer Kunle Adebajo, from the CEO of Arabs Nigeria, the chairman and CEO of Arab Nigeria. And he is a renowned consultancy firm, which is Over Arab and Partners Nigeria Limited. He had a very wide experience in the design, construction, and management of numerous challenges and successful projects across the country and abroad. In addition to his bachelor engineering degree in civil engineering from Cardiff at the University of Wales, he possesses a Master of Science degree in structural steelwork from the prestigious, oh my God, Imperial College London. I didn't see that coming. A past president of Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineer and a past chairman of Ikeja branch of the Nigerian Society. He has earned a reputation in the construction industry as a thorough professional with an unyielding commitment to excellence. People that do things right. He has served in many roles, such as the chairman of the NSE Codes and Standard Committee and chairman of the training committee of the Association of Consulting Engineers in Nigeria, ACEN. He is currently the council member and the honorary treasury of ACEN. Engineer Adebajo has, during his 40 years of professional life, trained and positively influenced the career of so many in every ready to impact his considerable knowledge to whoever comes across him. The last time I was speaking to him, it wasn't even in Nigeria, it was in West Africa somewhere. Again, doing exactly the same thing. He has been an active agent of change in Nigerian construction industry and is a well-known commentator and influencer on matters related to building collapses in the country. Engineer Adebajo, FNSC chairman, we will make a 20 minutes or so presentation on this topic we are talking about this afternoon, which is a recent building collapse in Nigeria. Engineer, over to you. Thank you.
Engineer Adebajo, can you unmute yourself, please?
My apologies. Good. Thank you very much, Dr. Sunday Pokola. And certainly thank you very much to the chairman of this great branch, the London branch of the NSE. Thank you for inviting me. And I want to say also thank you so much to everybody who is here. It's amazing. The numbers are shooting up for a Saturday afternoon. It's quite something. And I think it's because this is obviously an important and topical subject. So I would say the best thing we can do is to make the best of this session. There are various ways I could have tackled this, but I think the best way is just to talk, to discuss. Since the sad incident on Monday the 1st, so much has been said, so much has been heard, so much has been written. And I think it's quite amusing sometimes when you see some of the things that are said and speculated. And I think one thing I will say is this is a structural collapse. And so naturally, I hope you will be listening and seeking to listen to the advice of structural engineers. I'm not saying that other professionals should not make their commentaries known, but I will say that the structural engineer is trained to make buildings stand up, and where they don't stand up, that is actually part of the challenge, to understand exactly why this has gone wrong so that it never happens again. And I will say on a personal note that these are the type of challenges that really excite me. If I didn't have challenges like this, and of course, putting up nice buildings and interesting engineering feats, I would probably have gone into trading and made money as against my poor financial state right now as an engineer. Anyway, that's the introduction. Let's talk about what really happened in Lagos, what really happened. And this afternoon, I think I will warn, it's not viewers' discretion in terms of goriness, but in terms of fact. Again, I will say as engineers, we aren't really taken to speculation and to gossip, etc. We want to deal with the facts. And since that happened, that event, unfortunate event happened, the Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers has actually been on the scene. They've done and completed a preliminary structural investigation. I believe it's going to, at some stage, be brought forward to the public. I've had the privilege of reviewing it, I think on 2 occasions, and it just shows that when people say, well, where are the structural engineers? We're not hearing from them. The reality of it is they are there doing the assessment, doing the analysis, trying to make sense out of it all. That why should a 21-story building collapse? Not just why should it collapse, it's not even yet loaded to its design loading. As I'm sure you all know, it's still very much an uncompleted building. So there are things, but I want to tell you that the NI-Struct-T has actually, to a large extent, already unraveled a lot. I will reveal some. I will not necessarily, I will probably hold some back so that I'm not accused of either prejudicing or preempting the findings of the numerous panels. I think the one thing that there are many of now are panels, and I believe that's what we Nigerians do very well. But the facts are the facts. So let's get down to it. When you have a building like this and it collapses in such a dramatic manner, it's not even a partial collapse. Many times in the past, we've been talking about building collapses. And if you Google or you do use another search engine, I'm sure you'll find that Nigeria, there will be some commentary there saying it's not unusual to have building collapses in Nigeria. That is true, but I would also say that most of those collapses are usually, you know, they're building a 2-story building, and the decking was not properly braced and it comes down, and those are still collapses, and many of them do lead to casualties. But the type we've seen here is so dramatic because another thing I can say is that over the years, when I've been asked to give commentary on building collapses, one of the things we used to say many years ago is, well, it's due to the non-involvement of structural engineers or the non-involvement of professionals. And usually we were right in those days. You would find it was a bricklayer or somebody, a technician who claims he's an engineer or an architect handling the project. But those are generally small buildings, and they generally are, you tend to describe it really as partial collapses, usually during construction. Yes, this one on 44 Gerald, it was also under construction. And by the time we finish this little session, I think you'll see why, in actual fact, buildings under construction sometimes tends to be even more of a danger of such things than completed buildings. So this building in itself was raised. Our preliminary investigations, and I qualify this, but the facts of the matter appear to be that the underlying problem was that this building was conceived to be something smaller than it was. In fact, the very original idea behind this building was 6 stories, 6. It then very quickly went to 12 stories and 15 stories. However, why I say I qualify this is before you start gasping and saying, oh, wow, there is absolutely nothing wrong in changing designs if you have done it before you've started the construction. So from all indications, it was 15 stories as at the time they started the piling. That's the foundations. And what seems to have gone wrong is that either between the original 6, 12, 15, or even when it then went to 21 stories, the change management was obviously very faulty. In other words, if you, let me think of a very simple, non-technical explanation. If you have told the children to go and lay the table for breakfast, and they have assumed, or you have in fact told them it's going to be yam and egg, then they would have flat plates, they would have knife and fork, and that would be the expectation to lay the table. If, however, you then suddenly tell them, no, it's ogi and akara, the children would definitely realize that it's no longer a flat plate, it's a bowl. What they may forget is that it's no longer a knife and fork either. It's going to be a spoon. Now, if you try and translate that very strange example to structural buildings, if you have changed a building, and again, I say it, there's nothing wrong. We do it all the time. Some people get into a building halfway through and say, I don't want this kitchen to be as small as this, or I don't want a door to be leading into this particular room. You can make amendments, but you must be consistent in following through with all the implications. And the reality of it is the only people who can really assess all the implications are the building professionals, and in this instance, the structural engineer. So you cannot simply prorata from 15 to 21 and not expect something to go wrong. So that started the problem. But it was much more than that. Piling was done at 15 stories in terms of the design. And from all indications from the investigation done by structural engineers, it appears, and I'm sure this will still have to, and that's why I am being cautious in what I say, it appears that there was some inadequacy in the piling. And the foundations are, as everybody knows, very, very key. So not only were there problems, but there was some attempts at remedial work. And we found out that there were additional piles being included due to the inadequacy of the existing. So put that to one side and just imagine that the foundations possibly would have a problem. But what about the superstructure? What we call all the stuff we can see above? Again, from all indications, and I think last night, this was actually about 3 or 4 days after the NI-T report was being concluded, we understand that clearly the columns at the lower levels were undergoing some form of stress. There were cracks. And now I come back again to the same issue of change management, whereby the designers or those who were involved did not take into account exactly how they would solve that issue properly. And this is where you should certainly hold your breath and gasp. There were attempts to correct this. And in attempting to correct it, they wanted to increase the capacity and the size of the columns. In order to do that, they wanted to wrap the columns and make them larger. And in doing so, they started breaking or chiseling away at what was already very poor, defective structural members. The one thing structural engineers know is that you are meant to prop, you're meant to relieve the members of some of that loading before you start to try and do any form of remedial work. But I'm going to come back to that issue when we talk generally. And of course, I'm going to watch my time. There's a lot to be said, but I won't say, I'll still try and just keep within time. So once again, defective issues with regards trying to make amends to a bad situation. And we've seen letters flying around, saying X said he was no longer interested, and why. Maybe during the question time, we'll be able to examine exactly why some of those letters are not really as good as they should have been. They should have certainly not just excluded themselves, but raised appropriate alarms. But that's again is something else. So a lot has been said already in terms of the deficiencies. I will leave out the issues of the fact that the materials didn't seem necessarily fantastic, because that is not the reason why a 21-story building would have crashed down in the manner it did. We certainly have some major issues. And I will tell you, this is the first time in my professional life of 40 years plus or whatever, that I would see such, situations for this type of building. So let me qualify also, or let me talk about why this is different from our normal 2-story buildings done by Baba, which comes down. This was always going to be a major building. It's in full view. It's right in the middle of Ikoyi, one of the areas with the highest real estate value, all the big shots around, etc. So it's absolutely incredible that this would happen in full glare and full view. I'm going to jump to talk a little bit about not necessarily the developer, because I really do commiserate with everybody who has been affected, including obviously all those who are involved in the project. But I want to just say that we should keep sentiment out of it. We should look at fact. But one thing I have seen, and I was surprised to see even very well-respected journalists bringing it up and saying, well, he planned to live there, and so he would never have done anything to jeopardize that. And, he was not planning suicide, etc. True, but you see, this is where the bane of the problem is. Construction has become an all-comers affair where people who are not trained to understand the implications of things get involved. And if I say that we're talking a little bit about cutting corners, I don't believe that it was necessarily deliberate to cut any corners. I believe that we all, and all of us on this, we're now reaching something like about 100 and getting up to 130 in the room. And I'm sure we have all done what would be considered in a way cutting corners. For instance, if our phone rings whilst we're driving, there's every likelihood that even though we've been taught to, or been told or instructed to find a place to stop and answer the call safely, we probably wouldn't do that. Instead, we will answer the call, but we would carefully say, please, I'm driving, I can't really talk much, and then we move on. There is an example, or another is you've been told use the overhead bridge, but you realize that climbing up and climbing across and coming back down is nowhere near as fast as just making a quick dash, and you know that you're energetic enough, you think you're very good, and then the poor guy who crosses over the road and is hit, he did not plan suicide. He did not plan to harm himself or others, but it has happened. So I use this to say that in construction, and particularly in Nigeria, there are so many people who do not understand the implications of reducing specs or not following instructions or advice. Us as professionals, I'm sure there are many of us professionals in the room here, we have a hard task getting our message across. You know, majority of people do feel that at this time they can sort of almost not necessarily disregard what the professionals are saying, but you know, sweeten it down a bit and say, well, okay, if he said I should provide 6, I'll provide 4. I'm sure it's okay. They've allowed factor of safeties. And yes, moving on to that issue, that building should have had significant factor of safeties built into it. We do, that's what we're trained to do, because we don't know the exact loading that the building will be subjected to. We don't know the exact conditions. But those factor of safeties are not for changing from 1 floor to 5 floors. They are purely for the uncertainties, and those uncertainties are not totally out of place. They can happen. So that's another aspect. Okay, let's push a little bit on to talk about what should have been done and how do we stop this from happening. I'm sure you've deduced some from what I've said, but one of the things that was very worrying, and I think I will state it, is that when these buildings, when this building collapsed, I think the various parastatals tried their best to make the best of a bad scene, but it was still very, very hectic. It was still very uncoordinated, and there's pure reliance on just getting bulldozers in and removing rubble. That is not always the best. It might even cause damage to those who are trapped under, but that seems to be the only option. I think there are other options by now. We should have means of detecting people who are still alive within the rubble, such as sniffer dogs, possible sensors of one kind, heat sensors, whatever it is. We should be a little bit more, you know, a little bit more positive in the way in which we attack this. In addition, it's usually a very dangerous scene. I have said, as a structural engineer, I've been to so many of these type of sites, not a 21-story, I dare say, but the ones I refer to. And most of the time, it's usually a very dangerous period of time because anything could happen. In this instance, the other blocks, this was 1 of 3 blocks. There's a need, and there still is a need to do checks and to I think I was muted there, probably because somebody else. No problem at all.
I'm trying to
understand.
I'm trying to mute everybody else that was talking in the background. Sorry about that. Are you back now?
Okay, now I'm back. Yes.
Yeah.
No problem at all. Thanks. So I'm not even sure where I was now. So excited about it all. However, I do think that we need to be more proactive in being able to take care of these sort of situations. Another thing that I think we need to draw out of this, and this is where people would have been wondering, oh, is he for one sparing the regulatory bodies? By no means. I think I put the biggest blame on them. I'm not here to blame blame anybody, but for such a building to be going up, you would expect so much attention. If this was being done in the center of London, there will be building inspectors, there will be all sorts of quality control and quality assurance. The QMS system, the ISO system will be very much in place. And we have that. We have that here. We're doing it on our projects. So for a building like that, it's very, very clear that something went wrong. And I guess many of us even kick ourselves now and say, didn't we even notice it ourselves? But certainly the regulatory bodies should have. It's really very, very bad. And I think one thing that most of us do, and hopefully we will change this now with the concept of whistleblowing, etc., is we just assume, oh, well, it must be okay because it's going ahead. If it weren't, the authorities would have shut it down. And I understand that to some extent they even did. But, you know, it's just absolutely amazing that this would happen. What do we do to stop it happening? When you look at the Nigerian, and I don't want to make it a Nigerian thing, I think when you look at the all over the world, people will be told, please don't walk on the grass. But many will look left and right, and if they don't see any reason why they can't walk on the grass, they will walk. They'll probably justify it by saying, well, at least if I'm the only one, then there won't be marks on the grass. But the reality of it is everybody is also going to do the same, and it's going to lead to the reason why you are told not to walk on the grass or to cross the grass. So in a similar vein, we cannot but have belts and braces in our construction industry. Nobody is going to follow the rules if these rules are not being, you know, if there's no form of, the word skips me now, but we need to be sure that the authorities do indeed make sure that these rules are followed. And if somebody, I know the journalists come and say, you have building code. Yes, we have building code. Oh, this, that, and the other. It's, of course, we must have all these, but the reality of it is it becomes just paper if nobody is making sure that we stick to it. So enforcement, I've just seen, that was the word, it's disappeared for a minute. So we must, that is, I'm afraid, the one of the major things. However, that is also part of the problem. How many people are there to enforce? How many, a building, a 21-story building is meant to go in for planning approval. It's meant to go in for checks. It's meant to be checked from top to bottom. I stand bold to say that I would love to see how the panel will come out with its investigation and show that this building has been checked the way in which we would have to check it if we were doing it in our offices. I would say that for a 21-story building, you would actually end up having, just forgetting the architectural drawings and the M&E, just structural drawings alone would be in the range of a minimum of 150 drawings. These have to be checked. They have to check, the calculations need to be checked. You need to have people who understand the use of the software being used, etc. I will say the planning authority are totally understaffed. So how is it done in other climes, like in the UK? You simply make use of the private sector. You simply ask them to be involved. They take it on, and they will take on that responsibility. And that is what we have been talking about for years. I don't want to say that maybe this will change things, but I can definitely tell you that unless we go down that route, there is no way that with a city, a mega city like Lagos, with 20-something million people, every single night, there are at least 15 to 20 sites, clandestine sites that just come up to do some casting overnight, and then we go underground again in daytime. There are people doing extensions that have not been approved. There are people doing all sorts of things. So there is a lot to be done. And maybe the authorities will start to realize that they cannot do it alone. They must, we talk about PPP in projects. It's exactly the same thing in the construction industry. They need to make use of those who do it day in, day out, and who have the capacity. But more importantly, they also have the professional indemnity. They have to cover themselves with insurance. And so to a large extent, they are likely to use the due diligence that they should. Now, I'm rounding up because I don't want to take all the time. Am I done on my 20 minutes or how?
Yeah, you're almost there. You can wrap up now.
Okay.
Up to another 3 more minutes, I think.
Oh wow, very good. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about some of the things that need to be done. I want to now just go into more call it the general gist issues. Moving it away from the technical. The reality of it is this country needs to be sanitized. And it's interesting that during the COVID thing, we've been using sanitizers. I think the truth is anything goes in this country. You can get away with so much. And it's a shame. I am not blaming this particular failure on that, but I am simply saying that from what we observe every single day, you have so much corruption in terms of getting approvals. You have so much corruption in terms of inspections. You have so much corruption in terms of materials, defective materials coming into the country. So even us, and I'm referring to those of us in the room here, who are trying to do it properly, if you don't actually have the appropriate materials, it will be like a doctor prescribing the right medication, but it's just salt or it's just chalk. It's not going to work. So we do have, it's an uphill battle. We need everybody to roll up their sleeves on this. I will end by saying that definitely on behalf of the Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers, I've spoken several times with their president. I know that we are not going to allow this to just go quiet. We need to see it right to the very, very end. And that is a promise. So I think all of us here should do likewise. We should ensure that we get to understand. Final. Are our buildings safe? Should you be worried? I would say, generally speaking, there is no cause for alarm. This is one out of so many, and it is still being done reasonably well. Most buildings, even when there are errors or when there are defective things, they don't collapse in such a dramatic manner. They usually give signs and then you can take appropriate action. So do not be alarmed. Our buildings are safe, but please, if you observe any potential signs, call in a structural engineer at the shortest of notices. Let him simply tell you, don't be worried about it. Don't assume that you needn't be worried about it. So far, so good. I'll be very, very happy to answer general questions. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Oops. Thank you very much. I thought I was muting myself there. Yes, Amazing, amazing presentation, the engineer. You really, explain everything, all the news we've had for the week or 2 weeks that this thing has happened, and assumption that people have made. You really spell it out. You give us a good narrative of exactly what you think, in your own view as a structural engineer, what could have gone wrong or what did go wrong, and you're still investigating. And I'm very, very pleased to see that Institution of Structural Engineering in Nigeria is already presenting, already working on these, already coming out with their own report. The reason why I say that, the Grenfell fire that happened about 2 years ago in England, in London, immediately it happened. Immediately a committee was put together. Practically less than 24 hours after that fire happened, a committee was put together. And the case, the hearing of the whole thing was broadcast live on TV. And I was fortunate to advise a bit on that because my PhD was about overcladding. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, Thursday, I went to see a play where they were thinking of looking at value engineering. Is value engineering the cause of this fire? And it shows that the cladding manufacturer, the supplier, the contractor, all they were trying to do is to cut 800,000 out of the contract by using the wrong cladding that they know very well will not pass if it's a fire. So again, these are things that people could do to try and cut corners, as you say. So cutting corners is not just in Nigeria or in Africa. It can happen anywhere in the world. So we're so pleased that that particular building, over 80 people died within half an hour. 80 people died. So, it's one of those things that we have to, as an engineer, we have to keep saying it, we have to keep speaking out, because everybody's blaming engineers at the moment for this particular collapse. So as a result of that, I don't know what I want to get you to answer some of the questions that already been posted on the chat, or we can wait until we get into this, interactive mode, because we still have 6 other people or 7 other people who need to speak for about 2 or 3 minutes each. Yeah, if you don't mind, and
please,
you have
please,
time.
definitely, I would love to hear. I'm also here to learn, so I will be grateful
Thank you.
for
So
them.
let's hold on onto your questions to you yet until we finish with all these other guys. Right. What we're gonna do next, ladies and gentlemen, engineers, our speakers, is about 7 of them. I think 7 of them. We've posed some questions to them. They don't have to answer all the questions or issue for them to discuss. And there are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. Yeah, and I call them the 5 W's and 1 H. The 5 W and 1 H, I call them. And the first one, what do you think caused the building to collapse? It doesn't have to be this building, but what do you think caused any building to collapse? Yeah, and why do we allow such thing to happen without detection? Is there a way we could prevent this, like as earthquake, where they can pick up the tremble on the earth and be able to tell people, oh, there's an earthquake about to happen, evacuate yourself. What are the best practices that Nigerian engineer needs to follow in designing against sudden collapse? We know about collapse, but sudden collapse. I mean, look at the 9/11. That building was hit by 2 aircraft. So we know it's bound to sudden collapse. This building wasn't hit by anything. It just collapsed under its own weight. What can we do to detect this before it happens? And then number 4, what are the impacts such collapse have on the economy, the construction industry, the engineering profession, in terms of their life? What does that, what's the impact of that? Does he paint us in good light, or does he makes everybody not to believe us? And what are the way forward in terms of government approval? Engineer Adekunle spoke about a lot of things that the NSE and the Committee on Code and Standards are talking about, have been doing. And we have the chairman of the Code and Standard here today, Engineer Rose Madaki, who's going to be speaking to us. Policies, building control, code and standard, enforcement, and obviously the role of NSE, Koren, SON, and so many organizations, the government itself, the state government, what are their roles in making sure people, they enforce some of these things that needs to be done on such side. And the big question we have posed to a couple of these, all of these next presenters is that how can we prevent such collapse in future? So Engineer Olabi, please take it away and introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, our next speaker is Engineer Funlola Ojelade, the President of Association of Professional Women Engineers of Nigeria. Good afternoon, ma'am. I want to believe that you're already online. Then you have 10 minutes, or I guess it's 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes to share your view on this as well, about this building collapse. I know you're a chemical engineer, but you're also a project manager. So I want you to talk to us about the project management of that particular project, the building collapse. Could you say there's a wide gap between the top management and the artisans working there? Because I knew the artisans must have seen most of this, and because they didn't really have that rapport with their top management, they might not be able to talk about it. We would like you to talk about proper coordination and how to bridge this gap between the two.
Thank you. And I'd like to say good afternoon to everyone on the call today. And also a very big thank you to the keynote speaker, Engineer Kunle Adebajo, who has actually shed more light on a lot of things that, like, you know, like those of us who are civil engineers may not know about. And I actually believe that he has kind of wrapped everything up in a way. I won't be talking along those lines anymore, especially because I don't have the expertise to do so. But much more, well, yes, you want me to talk about the project management or what will have caused it. There's really no way that we can know whether it was properly managed or not, because none of us are there and the investigations are still ongoing. But I would just like to say one question that we all need to be asking, would be, how can we make people to act with integrity when they do their work? Because we're saying here, if everyone has done what they should do, the way it is written down, the regulatory body, the supervisory bodies that should look at the drawings and all that, have done everything the way they should do, and taking the necessary measures, then we won't be saying this. Of course, you mentioned something about the safety, on the columns and things like that. Is it that they don't know that they should not do it? So I think acting with integrity is something that we all, as professionals and as people, should consider. About 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Akwen had this webinar. It was the second that we called Business Unusual. And it's about integrity in engineering, infrastructure, procurement, and delivery. And it's something that one of the things we said there was that if we could all do our work, with integrity, our business with integrity, then everything like this collapse building is not going to happen. And of course, calling it business unusual should say one thing immediately, that it is not the usual practice to do things with integrity. And that's a very, very sad thing. And you see, we are engineers, and we know that many of us in this profession are actually part of this thing that happens. Because I know, like Engineer Adebayo said, in those days, they will say, oh, they didn't give the work to an engineer and so on. But now, even when engineers are involved, especially when it comes to the authorities enforcing what should be done on a site. A lot of things go on. Even after you have all your documents and all your approvals are complete, the officers of the authorities continue to come to your site and disturb you because they want them money. Even though your documents are okay. So you give them that money, and once you give money to collect, the person has already sold their conscience. So it's very easy to look away because the person has treated us well. He has, and you don't bother to come there, even when you should go there. And who are the ones that do this supervision? Engineers. These ones are engineers. Many of them are, Korean registered, everything that needs to be. So I think we should talk to ourselves. Each person should talk to themselves individually, and we should talk to ourselves as a body. Where we can do our things the way we should do it and do it with integrity, then we are not going to be having this kind of thing. It will not be left for buildings or structures that the owners have given to non-engineers. Then at that time we'll be able to come out loud and say, oh, this is what we should do. And another thing that also occurred to me also is that is the engineer, are we really paid enough? Are we really well paid? Because those are some of the things that can make people to, apart from, of course, sometimes we just sleep, because I have the keynote speaker saying, oh, I'm doing this structural because it's my passion, I like to do it. Maybe I will have been in business where I will have made much more money than I'm making now. And I noticed that it tells me something, that a lot of engineers are not well paid. And so while it is not an excuse to do the wrong thing, but those are things that one should look at to find the roots of doing work without without integrity and just allowing things that are not right to pass. Thank you. That's my submission.
Thank you, ma'am. Engineer Funlola Ojelade, President of AFWEN Nigeria. You're welcome, ma'am. We appreciate your short brief about this. The next speaker now is Engineer Kunle Adebajo. He's also a structural engineer that is based in the UK. We'd like to have your home view too on this building collapse using the Koi building as a case study. Engineer Kunle Adebajo.
Can I just introduce Toby a little bit? Toby, you're muted. Toby is a civil structural engineer as well as a building control consultant based in the UK. He's got about 35 years of experience and has practiced in Nigeria in his early career before moving to the UK. Principal structural engineer with the local government building control for 15 years. And he now has run a firm of providing structural engineering support to building control approved inspector firm. People like Toby, I try to avoid them when I do my work because actually I shouldn't say that. I do like them because they're the one that will pick up the things that you somehow overlook and you didn't check, or a number is supposed to be greater than 1 and it was 1.01 and you say, oh, that will be all right. Toby will pick it up and he will come to you and say, you need to put some more factors in that because this is not going to work. He will be contributing today to a few areas of the question I raised to you earlier. And he will be talking about the what impact such collapse have on economy, construction industry, and engineering profession in all, and also about what are the way forward in terms of government policies, building control, which is an area where he specializes in, and the role of NSE and Korean, and finally, what can we do to prevent such collapse in the future? Engineer Toby, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Somebody did mention something about the National Building Code. Yes, Nigeria does have a national building code, and it's almost 427 pages, which takes quite a long time to read. But the thing is, what needs to be done to that code is that it has to address some structures that are high-risk structures. You can't use the same code across all sorts of buildings. Buildings that are high-risk buildings, like high-rise buildings, probably need to have supplements so that those buildings are dealt with separately. Sometimes we have to look at what are the qualifications of these building control officers. How would they even know if something is going on when they're not even qualified to do so? If you send in a building control officer from the States to look at a serious structural thing that is going on, he could actually see that column being amended and think, well, nothing wrong with that. Maybe the engineer has checked it. So we need to check that these guys are actually knocking on our door, and like somebody has said, most of them just come around for something else, that they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. They have the right qualification and they have the right experience. In what they do in some local governments in London is that there are specific inspectors that deal with high-rise buildings, not just anybody. So you have to train some particular team of people to look after buildings over 2 or 3 story buildings. 2 or 3 story buildings, a lot of the things are very common, which you might not necessarily have to have a Korean or NSE engineer to look at because they've done so many of them. These are routine projects. But anything beyond that, you have to make sure you have it to technical reports, you have a structural engineer on site, you have quality control on site, and all these sort of things. Now, engineer Adebajo mentioned something about private sector. Now, a lot of local governments are even struggling here in the UK with checking calculations and checking drawings. Some of these drawings are very complicated. You wouldn't just put a 21-story building in front of anybody. That person has to have that specific experience. So what we would need to do is say anything over 3 stories, 4 stories, 5 stories should go to companies like Arrow, to companies like IRAS. These are experienced people that have done this sort of thing before.
Let me unmute yourself, please.
Yes, okay, yes. So building control needs to be supported by the private sector, because in the private sector, you have seasoned and more experienced intellectual engineers that have to deal with things like wind loading, disproportionate collapse. All these things are very complicated things that is probably beyond the average civil engineer. So I've talked about training, qualification of building control officers. Then you need to have a site engineer. Now, a site engineer you'd expect on a multi-story building like this also has to be somebody that is qualified, not just qualified, but experienced in this sort of thing. I was shocked when I read it on social media that somebody was chipping away at a column. I said, nah, never. Even in O-level physics wouldn't do that. But now, I'm really gassed to find out that that actually did happen. Now, how could that have happened? There was no site engineer on site to have made sure that there should have been some temporary works to support. Look, nobody should be touching a column on a 21-story building. It's not even thought of, because I can't see how they can prop it up at a lower level successfully. Yeah, that was just means for disaster. Now, when we say the impact on our industry, what's going to happen now is that a lot of people are going to think Nigerian engineers are not competent. Who gave them this 21-story building? They don't know anything. That is what is happening to us. Our image is being dented, right? So we have to fight our corner. We have to do something about this. We cannot leave this to these politicians. We cannot leave this to these building control that is influenced by all sorts of factors. Some of them are underpaid, some of them are not even paid for months. Of course, they're going to be paid.
Engineer Toby, you have 1 minute. You have 1 minute.
So we're looking at the effects of that, and then we are looking at how can we reduce corruption. And to reduce corruption, I think we need to involve third-party assurance schemes, just like they have the NHBC in UK. We bring in those assurance schemes, so you're not just building control, checking it. We are bringing in some other professionals from the private sector. I think I'll leave the other questions to other people to talk about. Thank you.
That it won't be invoked as his defense. I think prosecutors need to really try and focus on.
Thank you very much, Engineer Toby. Thank you. I really appreciate that for your view on these issue. Thank you very much for that. We're going to move on swiftly to Engineer Moses Yengumena. Moses, I have to put your name down to about 4 or 5 syllables before I can pronounce it. Sorry about that. I know you well enough by now. I should be able to pronounce your surname. Moses is a chartered professional engineer with over 25 years of experience in onshore, offshore, oil and gas, nuclear, defense, marine, and renewable energy industry. Most of his experience has been in engineering design and structural integrity of civil, structural, and mechanical components and systems. Dr. Moses is a chartered engineer, fellow of the Institution of Mechanical Engineering, and is also registered with Koren. So, Engineer Dr. Moses, please unmute yourself and let's have your contribution.
Okay, so where should I focus? Okay, thank you, Dr. Kukola. Yes, listening to Engineer Kunle Adebajo, my friend, I was not gasping because it was evident when I saw the collapse that collapse was unusual. You will not expect a building of that height to collapse that way, and like one floor stacked on top of each other. So I tried to look at what could be possible causes of collapse, since we are trying to understand what could cause a building to collapse. And one of the reasons why buildings collapse is when you have defects in design and the drawings. People sometimes violate code provisions because they want to have economical designs. And sometimes there are obvious errors because of poor quality control. I often show that when I see people do a calculation and they don't get even somebody to check it or somebody to review it, and it passes. And for a building of that size, I think it's pretty staggering. Now, sometimes buildings collapse when there's a change in structural configuration, which Engineer Kunle Adebajo alluded to. But when I heard somebody say they chipped at a column, I was surprised from the structural integrity point of view that a structure of that magnitude should be designed with sufficient redundancy, such that even if one column was maybe removed, if you have I believe for the loads redistributed, a single removal of a single column should not cause a building of that size to collapse. You have the shear walls, you have the lift shaft. How can a building of that size just come down like a pack of cards? So there was something unusual about that building. Again, there's a speculation that some of the materials may not have met specifications, or they may have been substandard, which Engineer Kunle also said, but the jury is out on that one. Another point is faulty execution and inadequate supervision. And that for me was quite profound, listening to Engineer Kunle, because there seems to have been a situation of people making wrong decisions. There was poor supervision. People acted, to put it bluntly, in a stupid way because of lack of standard construction materials and construction processes. You know, like Engineer Tomi referred to the fact that you wouldn't even try to remove a column without trying to put temporary props to hold the slab up. And then, of course, interestingly, the first time I had to comment on that building collapse, one thing that came to me was foundation. And just listening to the changes, the board changes, how people move from one to the other, whether it's correct or not, there was no way the foundation was going to support that stuff. And normally when there's foundation failure, it is not it's like the foundation sinks. It's foundation failure causes a building to sort of tilt. So you have a warning of impending failure, and gives time for people to evacuate. So again, there's concern in Nigeria that people don't do adequate geotechnical investigation. I don't know how much geotechnical investigation was done for this building. I would expect it to have been robust, and so that the building doesn't collapse. The likelihood that a pile, for a properly designed building would give way under construction and the member not being able to take the load is unusual. And then, of course, properly designed, you should have sufficient end bearing or friction for the pile to support the load. My view is whether the building was designed for 15 and raised to 21, I don't think it was at that, there was sufficient overloading to have caused that building to collapse. Because if you do a simple calculation and you divide, say, 20 floors that have been supported by the bottom columns, you still have a 1.3. So at the stage where the building collapsed, we still don't even have the full complement of permanent dead loads. It was still just self-weight. So there was no way the columns would have given way if there was proper supervision, if there was good monitoring and control. So I came to the conclusion, even before listening to Engineer Kunle Adebajo, that there was clearly a problem of poor supervision, constructional deficiency. There was not effective monitoring and control. Because even if there's an error in design, and like Engineer Tomi mentioned, the building control people, maybe a specialist, I don't know, did that, will pick it up and say, oh, I think this structure is not robust enough. So we don't just design a structure to support loads. Structures have to be robust such that there's alternative load path if one a critical member fails or is deficient. So for me, I think it's clear to me now why that building collapsed the way it did. But I just want to elaborate a bit more about what I think were best practices for engineers to follow in designing against. Again, we don't normally design against collapse in structural engineering because you design for your structure to withstand the normal loads, but then you design for safety so that in case you have abnormal loads like blast or excessive wind, your structure becomes safe. That way you have enough time to evacuate people from the building. So there's no way you can design against sudden collapse because it would be too expensive. So that's why you have safety factors that tends to mitigate. So I don't know about how this building was designed. I would be interested to see the design if it's possible, but I want to see the level of redundancy that was in the design to ensure that there's alternative load path, even if they remove that column, for example. There's a concept that I was discussing with Dr. Kukola a few days ago. There's a concept of compressive membrane action. There's arching. So even if you lose a member and your reinforcement is continuous, you will expect a slab or beam to be able to withstand loads. As an undergraduate in Nigeria, I supervised a building where we were monitoring the deflection of a beam. And that is even like a 2 or 3 story building. The other thing is, again, I go back to the fact that how adequate were the shear walls? If there was a shear wall in that building had good materials and they were not under spec, properly reinforced, then you could expect localized failure of a part of the building, not an entire collapse. Then again, I don't know what the wind state was, but normally you would design for like wind of 100-year return period. So there's not an issue of a case of a building just coming down because you had wind. Normally structures don't collapse under wind. Even in the UK, with the wind regime in the UK is several times you have in Nigeria. Because I'm familiar with Nigeria wind map, what we have is benign wind in Nigeria that shouldn't cause a building to collapse. Then the other thing I want to say is, from a structural point of view, I think Tomi alluded to it, you cannot design a 21-story or 15-story without third-party verification of somebody looking at what had been designed and making sure that your building just suddenly give way. Now, again, let me just conclude. What can we do to prevent such collapse in future? Again, I'm reluctant to talk about collapse because buildings should not be collapsing. It's a rare phenomenon. But I will close by suggesting that we need to have effective design We need to have robust monitoring and supervision and quality control by qualified, competent, and experienced personnel. Again, I may be touching some rare names here. I think we need to, in Nigeria, need to begin to separate structural engineers from civil engineers. I am a structural engineer. I don't talk about building roads. If somebody came to me and said, come and look at this road, I will tell them I don't do roads. I do bridges, I do buildings, I do offshore structures. So when people are registered in the UK as professional engineers, the Engineering Council is careful to separate people of different disciplines. So maybe in Nigeria, maybe our registration process should be such that individual professional organizations certify people to be chartered, so that when you are chartered, you are a chartered structural engineer, you are a chartered mechanical engineer. Not all of us are current registered. And every engineer civil engineering is very broad. I don't know how to do water engineering, but I understand my structures. So I think that's something we need to know. And then, of course,
engineer, you need to wrap up now.
Okay, let me finalize. Again, it's important when we do designs in Nigeria, we follow through concept, feed, and detailed design, because then you have an independent party that checks the building. And finally, I don't think, and I agree with Engineer Kunle Adebajo and Tommy, that unlicensed contractors should be supervising construction of critical infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moses. That was fantastic. Thank you for your contribution there. Engineer Atinuke, please.
All right, thank you, Engineer Moses. The next panelist is Engineer Rose Madaki, FNIC. I will just read a short profile. She is an erudite engineer with degrees in agric engineering, production engineering, and
Internet is fading there. Can you guys hear Atinuke at all?
She was muted.
Muted? Oh, by mistake, I'm sure.
Materials and metallurgy engineering. Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, sorry, somebody will mistakenly muted you. Can you go back and start again? Sorry.
Oh, we have another female engineer as one of our panelists for today. Her name is Engineer Rose Madaki, FNSC. I'll read a short profile now.
Muting. I think she's got some Wi-Fi connection problem. I think I'm going to take it up from here. Yeah. Engineer Rose Madaki is a erudite engineer, as people call her.
She is an erudite
with a degree in agriculture engineering, production engineering, and material.
Oh.
Sorry, Atinuke, your voice was fading. I was cutting up, so that's why I picked it up. Are you there? All right, let me just continue. Sorry about this, Rose.
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me properly now?
Your voice was coming in and out. That's why I wanted to pick it up.
I guess maybe because it's raining here, so maybe you could just.
Right. Okay. Right. 3-time lucky Engineer Rose. There you go. She's a past president of NSE Victoria Highland, past president of NSE Lagos Zone, past president or chairman of chairmen in 78 branches. I've heard of chairman and chairperson before, but chairman of chairmen. Now, wow. A fellow of NSC, a fellow of Nigerian Institute of Mechanical Engineering, and also of automobile engineers. Currently the chairman of the committee, which I'm a member of, Committee on Code and Standard, and ISO auditor in quality management system, environmental management system, occupational health and safety management system. Currently work with Standard Organization of Nigeria. Engineer Rose, how did it go wrong? Tell us. What is SON doing? Or what SON should have been doing that they're not doing? I was told the day the building collapsed, they were there taking samples. Is that the right time to take samples? The floor is yours.
Okay, my chairman and other facilitators, Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my thoughts in this particular segment. I actually invited a lot of people from my organization to join this forum. It's quite interesting. I might not talk much because I've not gotten the result of the collapse building, but I would like to talk generally on what I think or what we think that are the causes of collapse building. However, I want to, before I say something, I want to
Sorry for interrupting you, ma. Your TV is on. I guess it's distractive.
Okay. Kashe TV. So I want to off it. I want to say that whenever an engineer constructs, we are prompt to killing. And we don't just kill one, we kill many. So it is not time to apportion blame, but to take responsibilities. I want us here to take responsibilities, even if it's just one of us. He is part of us. First, I would just want to share some of my personal experience in the field. I'm not a structural engineer, but I understand some of, because we go out to field to do inspection. Some of the causes of collapse building, from what I saw, were first, wrong design. Wrong design affects building collapse. Aside from wrong design, we have wrong application of reinforcement in a structure. I have seen where I was inspecting a collapse building. I saw in the primary beams, both the primary and secondary beams, the applications of the steel bars were completely different. The same primary beam is carrying 11 mm of steel bar and 12 mm on the same primary beam, which is very, very wrong. The applications of reinforcement bars on the columns of the building were wrongly distributed, meaning the loads across the structure were wrongly distributed. This could cause collapse of a structure. Then we normally channel collapse of a structure to wrong usage of material. That is not only the cause. Wrong deviating from the initial design, just as the one that happened in Lagos, caused collapse building. I remember I personally took study of 10 years of collapse building in Lagos. And initially, I was stipulating, where arguing that no, it's usually the steel bars, the wrong enforcement, different dimensions in a structure cause the failure of a structure. But from that study, we realized that we came up with the highest percentage of deviation from initial building plan cause collapse of building. So if you look at this particular one in Lagos, yes, the foundation was good, was okay, but what went wrong up there? Because the structure was not completely completed. So what went wrong? We usually, Dr. Popola asked me that what they invited SON to come to inspect such a building. Yes, we are mindful of the quality of material that is used in a structure. The quality of material matters, especially the critical quality of material in a structure. Is these blocks or concrete members and the reinforcement bar that are used. So mostly once there is collapse building, we go there to pick samples, each angle of the building to go and test. For the one in Lagos, the test result is not out, so I'm not supposed to say anything about it. But the one that I've inspected a couple of them, there was one that happened in Owerri. I was there, I checked it, and I gave a brief information about what I saw. Press briefing, sorry. The slabs, the spray of the reinforcement on the slabs were not even. And then the reinforcement on the columns were not even. And having known that the structure was initially designed for, I think, 7-story, it went up to 11. It added more load to the foundation, which was against the initial design. So when standard organization goes, it picks up the structure, the reinforcement bars, to go and check the quality of the bars used. I mean, the steel bars used for the structure. Most times, they don't meet our specifications because the engineers or the builders on site always cut corners by buying cheaper materials. We still have flooded substandard steel bars in the market. People run away from Nigerian-made steel bars saying it's more expensive. But it saves lives because the standard body itself regulates them. There is no company in Nigeria that manufactures steel bars that is not being monitored by Standard Organization of Nigeria. There is none, unless they hide where they cannot be seen. But if they are in the open, they inspect them. And then we check, once we go to pick a sample in a collapsed building site, we trace that material to the producer. They have mark and they are traceable. That is the one made in Nigeria. And the ones that are brought outside the country, some of them, you know, our borders in Nigeria are porous. They cut across, you block them here, they go through this way. They flood the market with substandards. But the ones that are produced here are traceable. The ones that were checked in that last collapsed building I inspected, they were traceable and the material used were okay. We all know that structures like steel bars are the ones critically used in a building. And then for the concrete blocks that are used, we have standard for concrete blocks. You will find out that in a site, you will see a structural engineer in the site. He will insist that he wants to produce either the blocks, even the concrete members that he brings into site, he wants to produce them by himself. But does he produce them based on the required standards? We have standard for all this, but none of them wants to go through that route. If you talk, they will say, no, it's expensive. We know to produce a cement, 9 inches block or 6 inches block, who can contain, like the 9 inches block contains more load. And we know 1 bag of cement will go for 6 pounds of sand. Nobody wants to do that. 1 bag of sand, if you go to the site to see them producing or manufacturing them, 1 bag of sand, they can produce up to 30 blocks of 9 inches, 32 blocks of 6 inches. So you can imagine putting those blocks in a structure, and then you are adding more load. Where the 9 inches supposed to be, you are putting 6 inches. Definitely there will be issues there.
Okay.
So we pick the blocks. Okay, we need to pick those samples to go and confirm whether they have met the basic requirements before putting them in use in the site. And I do not accept the engineer in this last collapsed building that he does not or he did not know what to do. You have to be sure of the quality of material you are using on site. That is not an excuse. This will not, we must not compromise that. And then even the blocks or the concrete members deployed to the site, you have to ascertain the quality of those products used in the site. So I think we, the engineers, once something like this happens, we must not allow whoever that is responsible to go scot-free. There should be a punishment for that. So if you say this is my time, I actually have a lot to talk. You said you were asking what impact does it cause to national economy? Of course, we'll lose resources. Can you calculate the amount of money spent already in this collapsed building and is not put to use? Of course, we have lost a lot of money. So it's something that in our design, we have to take cognizance of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We still have a possibility for other people to ask you questions, especially in your role as an employee of SON. I'm sure there's a lot of questions in the chat already that will be directed to you later on. So thank you very much, Engineer Madaki, and also for sharing your view on these and the fact and some of your experience of how people are misplacing reinforcement in structures. So thank you very much for that. We're going to move on quickly. As I've said, if you need to ask any question, please, it's quicker for us to read it in the chat because people are asking similar questions so that we're able to combine it together and then post it to our panelists to discuss later on. So put your question in the chat, and we'll come back to them at the end of the presentation. Moving on, the next one is Engineer Gabriel, the Ige. A recent engineer with experience obtained his BSc degree in civil and structural engineering from University of Bradford in early or mid-80s. He's a young man, and a postgraduate diploma in property evaluation. And the laws and law, property evaluation and law, University in London again towards the end of 90s. Came to high-rise building during his career, and he posts a lot of his building on our chat group, on our WhatsApp group. There's one in Stratford he's doing now. It's about 25 story, and he keep telling us it's there, he's standing up. He's a project manager for his company, senior construction manager, and he's now a regional planning manager for Vinci Construction UK. He's a member of the Chartered Institute of Building UK and a member of Nigerian Society of Engineers, and is one of our strong members in London, UK branch. So, Engineer Ige, take it away. You go.
Thank you,
Minutes.
Can you hear me clearly? Hello?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Very well.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to say, to start off with, may the souls of those lost in the building collapse rest in peace. Amen. There are many high-rise buildings in Nigeria, mostly in Lagos, which have stood up to the test of time. For example, Cocoa House, the 26-story building, was commissioned in 1960 and during the 1960s, and it's still standing. So that means Nigerians have the competence, they have the skills and the experience to build high-rise buildings that last. So, but I think the key is to look for an appointment. You need to appoint suitably qualified and experienced project team. What caused this building to collapse, or what caused buildings to collapse? In the absence of site visits or studying the drawings of the building that collapsed, I can only make an assumption based on my experience. But I think that there are at least four factors that have caused the collapse. The first one, I think, is the flawed structural design for this foundation, possibly, and flawed design of the superstructure. For example, maybe the core of the building, particularly high-rise, is the spine of the building. So if that's faulty and it gets loaded, and you can just imagine if your spine were removed from your body, your whole body will collapse. So I believe that there's possibly design flaws in the foundation and also the structure, particularly the core. And also, I don't think that building was designed for disproportionate and progressive collapse. That means that if one floor collapses, as Dr. Moses said, it should be designed such that if one floor collapses or one column fails, the whole building doesn't just come down to the ground. So the next factor, which I believe contributed to this collapse, is poor quality control, as everybody's been talking about. Basically, you have designers design the building, structural engineer would design the building, his colleague would check it, and then you go to a third party to do an independent check for such big buildings. Then building control is supposed to check your calculation. So moving from that, once you get the drawings, reinforcement schedules, you get to site, they erect the formwork, install the reinforcement. A site engineer, I used to be a site engineer years ago, supposed to check that the dimensions of the formwork is right, check the reinforcement is according to the bending schedule, check according to the drawings, check the temporary works, that's the false work that's supporting, and then also check for cleanliness, make sure you have the right cover. So it sounds like most of this wasn't done, And then when the concrete comes to site, the wet concrete is supposed to do a slump test and then also take cubes every 6 meters or according to the specification, and then test the cubes. At 7 days, if it doesn't reach the strength you're supposed to achieve at 7 days, then that's an alarm bell. Then you go into 14 days. If it doesn't meet that strength, then you start to look at, you test more cubes, and if they all fail, then you're looking at removing that section of the slab and rebuilding it, demolishing it. So it sounds like a lot of these things, a combination of all these factors contributed to the failure. Defective concrete probably wasn't compacted properly. But if I'm to say, I think there was just a system failure where all the people who were supposed to do the checks, from site engineer, project manager, building control, everybody failed at what they were supposed to do, and including the town planning officers. The next thing I want to talk about is, why do we allow such without detection? Why do we allow buildings to collapse without detecting? I think it's all part of a culture. In this particular case, a culture of indiscipline and lack of professionalism and integrity. And also the project team, I don't think were adequately, properly trained. There would have been warning signs. There would have been, as Engineer Adebajo said, there would have been cracks, but I believe that the project team either ignored them or they were forced to cover up all those signs, because a building doesn't just fall over without any notice. How can we prevent such collapses in the future? Well, I think mandatory checks, new laws, I believe, have to be passed where mandatory checks of design and during the construction phase by building control, town planners, the design engineers. Usually in the UK, if you're given a small building, the structural engineer who designed the building will visit site, particularly for the first concrete pour, and you agree where the construction joints are going to go. He'll check the concrete pour, reinforcement, and he'll sign off, and he'll come and do regular checks. And if he sees anything that's wrong, he will demand that you demolish it. So I think mandatory checks, we have to put it in, the government has to put it in law, that designers, site engineers, geotechnical engineers do checks at certain stages of, and they need to be empowered as well, such that they can actually stop you from building. And then lastly, I think like we have in the UK, we have a health and safety executive, particularly for the construction industry, where if there's a near accident or somebody reports, they can come to your site and shut you down. So without the legal powers, I think it will be very difficult to stop some of these malpractices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer. That was wonderful. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much for sharing your view on these and how these things are done in the UK. Even in the UK, where it's done very well, believe me, things do go wrong. It's only the continue enforcement, check twice before you cut, as they say in timber engineering, or measure twice before you cut anything. This time you have to check twice before you cut it, or before you sign anything to make sure it's okay. So there's some question coming in for you as well. So we're gonna let you have that as we go along. You can go onto the chat and have a look at some of these questions. Okay. We're gonna move on to our homegrown engineer here, Engineer Chinedu Ayasu, an amazing engineer who specializes in structural design, structural health monitoring, and structural condition assessment. Cut across energy, infrastructure, commercial, real estate. This guy is young and vibrant. Obtained his master's degree from Imperial College in early 2000. specialize in concrete structure. Basically, these high-rise is made of concrete structure. Recently become very interested in modular construction. Oh, really? I didn't know that. And I've designed several steel modular frame and pre-assemble units in LNG plants in Russia, Australia, Singapore. These guys move all over the world. I currently manage a structural survey practice focused on structural health monitoring and structural condition assessment. Also a technical advisor to estate improvement and expansion scheme on DFE, Department of Education or Environment?
Education, yes.
Education, right. And MOJ, Department of Justice.
Ministry of Justice.
Yeah, oh, these are big people that pay a lot of money. He also carries out surveys for commercial high-rise building as well as residential structural survey. Engineer Chinedu, thank you for coming. Please share your view with us. You got
thank you. So yes,
and Engineer Chinedu is also the vice chairman of NSE London UK branch.
How did I forget to say that?
My vice chairman, over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I would go really quickly and say what I've got to say. First of all, it's very heartbreaking, and I feel so sad that even right now, that as we speak, there could be someone in agony in that building, someone waiting for help. It's such a sad situation, and it really should not have happened. What's interesting about this particular collapse is that it's almost like the first, in fact, it is the first major structural collapse with a high rise in Nigeria. We've had several collapses, like Engineer Kunle Adebajo noted that, there've been several of these collapses for residential buildings, 2-story, 3-story, 2-story mainly, but this is the first time. This is almost, if I don't want to be negative, but maybe the beginning of collapses for high-rise buildings in Nigeria, and I do not accept that. But it's a time when we really have to do more of what we're doing now, which is come together and nip it in the bud and stop it. And there's no better way of doing so than having these collaborations. Like like Dr. Popala said, this happens everywhere in the world, and Nigeria is no exception. But we have to do something. Now, in 1968, something like this happened, where there was an explosion, a gas explosion in a high-rise structure. And it's the Ronan Point structure. It's Ronan Point, and most of us will be aware of this this incident, because it's brought about what many of us have mentioned here: the regulations around disproportionate collapse. And so, in answering the questions that we have, that have been put across to us about what the reason for this collapse, or rather this, this incident would have been, I would say that it's largely, in addition to the obvious foundation errors that were pointed out by the forensic analysis that Kunle, Engineer Kunle has mentioned, that has occurred, which is fantastic, by the way. I'm so impressed that we that such a forensic analysis has been done. But I believe that largely the failure was more a failure due to disproportionate collapse. And I don't know if indeed we had a core. I don't know if we had a lift shaft that would have provided additional or spare lateral or backup lateral stability for that building. But if indeed we did, then I do not think the collapse experience would have been to that degree. As mentioned before, disproportionate collapse is a designing against disproportionate collapse means that you you design your systems in such a way that the collapse of a single element or an isolated structural element does not result in a collapse of the rest of the structure or any sort of collapse that is disproportionate to the original cause. And like I said, the UK, all those regulations on disproportional collapse came from Ronan Point. I believe that right now we're at a point in our history in Nigeria where indeed we need to analyze this collapse and come up with our own rules. It may not just be applying disproportionate collapse rule in our design. It might be even further. I would not go on to what I think, or no, to answering the other questions that were asked, because I believe the other speakers who have answered have given very, very good points. But my strong point here for me will be at design stage. At design stage, can we design out some of these possibilities or these errors? Something happens in my house where sometimes my wife will tell me, "Oh, you're eating a lot of bread," and I tell her, "Look, if you stop buying bread, I will not eat bread." So, what am I saying? I'm saying that is it possible that we can, as a standard, ensure that high-rise buildings are actually designed not just for the usual disproportionate collapse, but additionally fortified beyond increasing the utilization or the standard things would do, but additionally fortified if for instance there has to be a standard, a minimum vertical bracing arrangement, just to give us a third, fourth, fifth line of defense for Nigerian high-rise buildings, then we that's the way we should be going. There are other high-rise buildings in Nigeria at the moment. They haven't collapsed. It means that we can do it. But I strongly believe that we should take really we should look into our design methodologies, and try to see if we can address the problem from specifying um, reasonably conservative design, because we have the Nigerian factor where processes, for instance, are so difficult to enforce. Engineer Adekunle has talked about Adebajo, sorry, has talked about the enforcement not being there. So if there was a way to standardize and in such a way that we are able to fortify our structures beyond us depending on enforcement, I think that will really be a very, very, very good way of at least solving this problem. So for me, um, that would be a good way to look at it, because for instance, here in the UK, like I mentioned, here in the UK, those the we've come to a point in our history where we've been able to, well, they have been able to figure out where things went wrong. I feel that's the same thing that we should be doing in Nigeria from the design level. Now, going on to construction and how construction is and construction works. There's something very common in Nigeria or in concrete design where you feel you carry out, you're pouring your concrete and you stop at a point and then continue tomorrow. So we call those joints day joints. And the thing about day joints is sometimes, these artisans, they don't know that there should be continuity. So when the design has specified a certain continuous slab, the artisans on site, they put in formwork, they fill up to a certain level, and then they leave and come back the next day. But it's they don't realize that where they stopped, those that day joints, is actually it can be the beginning of, it could, for instance, allow moisture into the reinforcement, cause rusting, the concrete expands, then you have issues. So there's definitely construction, issues, and how designs are interpreted. But I think I'll go strongly on the point that if our design, if we get the design right, and if we have minimum standards in which we carry out design specific to Nigeria, taking into consideration that we could have loopholes in the material quality, taking into consideration all these other Nigerian factors in sizing our design, I think it will go a long way. It's not enough for us to rely on government or on regulations, because we've waited. How old am I? We've waited for over 30 years for these things to happen. We have to figure out a way that our design in the first place will be safe, and how we can be conservative enough, for instance, disproportionate collapse, or even having our own theories and interpretations, not necessarily disproportionate collapse. Disproportionate collapse is related to Ronan points in the UK. What is local to Nigeria? What are our unique, our unique problems, and how can we design those out? So that would be my contribution.
Thank you very much, my vice chairman. Thank you for that contribution there and your experience in some of these things. As you said, Roman Point changed the face of high-rise building construction in this country, and also panelized structures, because all the cladding on Roman Point were panelized and the connections were not done properly. So when that gas exploded, the whole panel just blew up, but it didn't bring the building down. Part of it collapsed, and it's still hanging there in catenary. So the building didn't actually come down. So that's to show there's some continuity, there's reinforcement with the right length and all that being provided. Maybe this is what was missing on this building. I don't know. Right, we're gonna move on to our last speaker here. It's been almost coming to over 2 hours now since we started. Thank you very much, everybody, for hanging around, for listening to us. I think we're sharing something very, very beautiful here. And some of the things you guys are saying today, I've never heard them before. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Our last speaker for the day, before we open the floor to everybody to contribute, that made a contribution or ask question, is Engineer Tai Fadikpe Davis, a resounding electrical engineer whose specialties lies in power supply, monitoring, and maintenance. A graduate of Uniben, yes, Uniben, production engineering in 1999. That's about time he graduated. Over the last decade, he has worked in the UK and globally across multiple sectors, such as healthcare, pharmaceutical, automobile, oil and gas, and currently power sector, in position of ranging from project engineer to plant leaders, global offshore services, quality manager, and business development manager across Africa and also in the UK. I met Tai about 2 months ago, and believe me, this guy have energy. This guy's, what they call in Yoruba, Ajala travels. This is what I used to do in the 80s and 90s. And Tai travels everywhere. I'm not even sure where he spent time with his family. He's always on the road. So Tai, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Engineer Dr. P. And thank you, everyone. To all 142 of us sitting in this room, 145 people now, I say good evening, and I'm going to keep it very short. Firstly, condolences with the families affected by what has happened in Lagos. It is sad anywhere in the world that this is happening. So I think I'm in a very good position tonight, being the last speaker. Every one of the speakers before me, you guys have covered very good points, so I'm not going to repeat what you've said. But from the introduction that Dr. P has given about me, my approach will be more on processes, procedures, and what we should do. I won't repeat anything you've done. So I acknowledge and respect every one of you, from Engineer Kunle Adebajo, Toby, Adebayo, Dr. Moses Inyegowena. I happen to know how to say your name because in Unibed, you know, that's one of the names you see regularly around there. And then Engineer Rose Madaki, Engineer Kayodege, and Chinedu Ayezu, and of course myself, you know. So for me, I think what has happened here is fundamental failures, okay? Fundamental. I've seen Engineer Tomi Adebayo use the term systemic failure. It is across all sides. So I will just kind of help summarize what we've been saying since. So basically, for a building to collapse, you're looking at 6 core reasons. We have at different times spoken about them. We start with the weak foundation or the soil type or weight. You spec a foundation for a building on the wrong soil type. We know Lagos, similar to Florida, is an island. So we have Lagos on water, there's all the salt coming in, yeah? And the kind of buildings we're talking about here is reinforced concrete. So concrete, you put in a lot of steel beams or steel rods in them, as Engineer Madaki was saying before. We have this steel coming in different quotes. So weak foundation is one big thing there. You're looking at poor quality or wrongly spec material, which is going to be my key area to talk about. So you specing the materials wrongly, you could have deterioration, decomposition, or reactions going on. If the wrong kind of steel, you put steel in concrete, there's bound to be some reaction. You see some rust. And it is a fact that rusting steel can expand up to 6 to 7 times its original thickness. So that steel is there inside the concrete. It is trying to explode, pop out. You begin to see a problem. You can see some pictures of some buildings where you see some watermark, almost like red or brown. It is the steel inside the concrete. Water has got inside it and it's just slipping down. There is damage there, okay? Now, that is point number 2. We'll talk about human errors. So a lot of artisans, technicians, and engineers, everyone wants to just do things quicker or just not the right way, or they simply do not know. Ask how many people building around the country today. What is the mix ratio for you to get a standard block? We've seen a few videos on social media where people are kicking Nigerian blocks. You punch a block and it goes like that. That says something to you. And then they pick blocks from other parts of the world and you throw them here and there. The blocks are standing steady. Is that not all the sign there? Point number 4 is poor structural engineering and load calculations. I mean, we have a lot of structural engineers on this gathering, on the panelists, and even in the main meeting. Other people have spoken about this. How well are we looking at our calculations? Who is doing them? Who is reviewing what? And of course, we're talking about the lack of or poor building regulations. I think in this case, Lagos State government has 4 different parastatals or 4 different bodies looking into these things. There's all the kind of approval. I think I have a list of them. And the last one, we can have natural disaster. That's another reason. We can have an earthquake, a tremor, fires. Of course, the one I'll add to this now is number 7, which is a terrorist attack where someone is deciding to fly into a building. Okay, so 6 plus 1, that one is abnormal. Okay, now if we look at those 6, I will focus on the process of approval now. What can we do differently? This has happened now. What are we going to do differently? So you look at the United Kingdom where I'm based. I'm just in Manchester and I'm lucky to be one of the few engineers who is a member of both the Manchester NSE and the London MSc, if Dr. P allows me to join London again. So I cut across the 2. And you see, we have standard building regulations, design approval portal that you can go to and put in any planning request, whether a new build or an enhancement or an improvement on what you have in place. I don't know, this is why I'm going to try not to speak specifically about the Ikoyi Gerard Road building, because we don't want to speculate here. We're professionals. So if you're not sure, you don't know, don't speak about it. But I do not know if Nigeria has a kind of building portal. One of the recommendations I'll be saying, so that we don't just talk around there and have no action to take away, is do we have a cross arrangement where those different bodies, Lagos State has like 4 different bodies. There is the LABSCA, what they call now, Lagos State building, the ones that actually went to this particular site at some point to stop work. Yeah, do we have a kind of cross-referencing of database If we don't, then that is one of the things to take note of and do here. So if a man is going to apply for developing a property, be that 5-story, 21 or 15, it doesn't matter now. What are the processes they are following? If he's talking to parastatal A, B, C, and D, do they all see what they're doing? Does A see what B is doing? Those are areas of weakness. So we're talking generally about systemic failure. I'm not going back to what people have said. These are the facts that we all understand. Let us make sure the body A is seeing what B is saying. So if B has approved and C disagrees, is there a way to refer back before you take it to D? What are our people doing? We know corruption is key part of this whole thing, but I won't speak to that. Okay. It is there in our society. We need a cultural change generally. I'm happy this position, I'm wrapping up what people have said there. So firstly, having a central database and creating an approval portal, that is one of my recommendations. So I'm addressing the question about best practices going forward to mitigate against collapse in the future. Again, we're also talking about how does Koren and NSE come in? So we are here now. The minute this kind of thing happens, everyone is looking at engineers and they're pointing fingers. We are the ones that carry the title engineer. I've been out of Uniben for over 21 years. I don't think I've ever used the title engineer in front of my name until I joined NSE Manchester, and recently I've just called myself Taiwo because I know it is a big responsibility. We allow everyone on the street who should not even, just like in medical profession, you have a lot of doctors around. Can you go and call yourself a doctor? People disrespect the engineering profession. You see even the guy that is laying blocks in the back of my garden calls himself an engineer. I think we need to begin to get to people. You cannot just be calling yourself an engineer if you're not one. There are due processes for getting to that level. Okay, now, so we're talking about syncing databases and ensuring all the prosecutors can see each other. We're also talking about we as NSE and Koren being able to have a stamp on that portal we're talking about there. If there is a way Koren and NSE can stamp a plan, that has to be our way to get into this now. We don't just want to talk to them and go away. Lagos state government, as these four bodies doing things, we want to say, okay, there has to be an independent way for NSE to get involved. There are structural engineers in the house that will say, okay, independent now, we're not getting paid for this, but this report or this request for approval is flying around. Do we approve it? Because it will come back to us. We are an independent body. There are voluntary people managing, there are volunteers doing this work. We need to find a way to be part of the approval process so that when something comes back, we're not reacting as we're doing now. We're already part of the process. We need to force ourselves to be part of it, whether Lagos state government or the federal government likes it or not. If Koren, who are the mandated ones, are able to get in, and NSE, we form a joint arrangement to be part of the rubber stamp. So we say a Koren or NSE stamp on every building approval or change. That is the second point I'm trying to drive in. The other point is, of course, the change control management. Okay, if a building was meant to be 5 stories or 10 stories or 20 or 15, and someone decides to change it to 25, I've heard from structural engineers in this room that it is possible. Changes can happen. We have change control management. So the question then is, what are the steps to follow? Who is checking what? Those are things to begin to look into properly again. And of course, the topic about site visits and inspection, I think we have to agree for that to happen. Okay, they may be coming for the wrong reasons. It is now due to ourselves to try and ensure those visits to sites are for the correct reasons. If a body in Lagos is coming in to inspect the site, what are they really doing? What are they inspecting? Is this a visit meaningful or a visit to just get something and go away? Are they doing some work? If they're already coming, that is good news for us. But we need to make sure they come to site for the right reasons and they do something. And of course, finally, I would say for every building, there should be some kind of safety register. Sadly, as the engineer Chinedu mentioned, there could still be some people alive in that building. crying for help, or just, I mean, we don't have any way of knowing. They don't even have the record. From what we're saying here, do they have records of everyone that's gone into that site? Something as simple as register as they go in. So I'm talking today about best practices that are not necessarily new. These are things available all over the world that we do. If there was a fire in my building in Manchester here, everyone can be accounted for. Up till now, we don't know. We're saying some people have come from other parts of Africa to work there. Those are people's uncles, fathers, people's sons dead in that building. It is sad. So again, I want to thank Engineer Popola, Dr. Popola, for getting me to be part of the panel here, and the position is giving me to just be the last speaker, just kind of rounding things up. It is systemic failure across board. We need to look at the overall process and find ways to at least sync databases. If there are 4 different agencies in Lagos doing different parts of the approval, are they seeing each other? Are they talking to each other? Do we have a central database? That is the thing to be pushing out to them now. And then I think that is it for me, really. I think it's Saturday and it's 4:06 here in Manchester. Thank you, everyone, for your patience, and thank you for giving me the chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tai, and sorry to your daughter for not taking her to that air today, but I'm sure you will do some other thing to compensate for that. Thank you very much for sharing your view on this amazing stuff. Right, before we move on and open the floor for people to bombard us with questions or commentary, I just want to acknowledge a couple of guys that have been there, engineers, you can call them guys, people like engineers. I've been there for almost 2 hours now. Just to acknowledge that we noticed your ear, and thank you very much for coming. Everybody, but these guys, so somehow their hierarchy, they are leaders, and we need to sort of, let them know that we notice them. Engineer Ademola Olorunfemi, if you're here, just say hello, please. Former president of NSE. Right, maybe he's not, maybe he's gone. Engineer Bitoye, KLM, if you're here, please say hello to us. Before we
Chairman, I'm here and I'm really following you.
Thank you.
And I give kudos to London branch as usual, to the chairman, to everybody. I say thank you. And especially to our dear engineer Adebajo. You have done well. All the panelists, the appointed president, everybody have been following the deal. So thank you so much. We appreciate you. So looking forward for more of this. Our professionalism is very important to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, KLM. Thank you very much for that. Engineer Tony Ajala, are you there? Former president of Engineering Forum of Nigerians. Are you there, Engineer Tony?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so give us a word or two, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is a very, very good seminar, and I'm very proud to be part of it. One of the things which I mentioned is about professionals' role in construction, in any construction. I will quote what Fela said. The tailor that is doing the work of a carpenter is Suegbe. And an engineer who is doing the real job of an engineer is Spako. There are many times the project managers who are in project management think that they are better off than engineers doing the work of engineer. I tell you one thing, when I was working in TFL, then we are engineers. And then they decided to create a project management center. And what we found out is that the project managers haven't got the technical experience. And they are the ones running the construction. And I always say to my manager then that if you don't have technical experience and you are doing project management and you are trying to control the construction, you are bound to go wrong. And honestly, we engineers, from the time we started our profession, we are project managers. We only started our scheme from beginning to the end. So in any case, everybody in the professional field must know their role. A civil engineer must know that he's a civil engineer. A structural engineer must know that he's a structural engineer. Architect must know that he's an architect. And we need to work together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Engineer Ajala. Very grateful for that. I saw him earlier, but it looks to have disappeared. Maybe we'll be able to give a view about Lagos State. Engineer Shegun Mati. Are you there, Shegun? He works for the Ministry for Work and Infrastructure, I think.
Dr. Pokola.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a chairman here, NSE branch, Engineer Tosin Ogumola. Maybe you can also.
Let's hear from you, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. P. It's been a very enlightening evening. I mean, quite loaded. And of course, just like somebody had said, indeed, we must have this engagement. I just put up something in the chat box, which for me is just the summary, at least the next step that I feel we must take now. Just like we had said, it's important we have independent involvement, as the involvement of independent bodies, in whatever it is that the state government is doing. And in line with the current guidelines on engineering regulations monitoring, we should have the state technical committee. But interestingly enough, Lagos state government or Lagos state is one of the states that we are yet to have that established. And this is the time for us as professionals to actually work with our colleagues in the government of Lagos State to ensure that indeed the STC on ERM is now established. It will allow for independent engagement for us to ensure that we will not have a repeat of this very unfortunate incident. So thank you very much.
Thank you, engineer. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the support you gave me when I visited your branch during the summer. Thank you very much for that. Right.
But Dr. Kokola, there's somebody here online with us, and we will be surprised that she is a senior. She's a director with NAPCA and also the APWEN Lagos chairman. So I wouldn't know if you would like her to speak on
No, I think there's a question on that. So when the question comes up, I'm going to bring her in. Just remind me of that. Yeah, thank you very much. Right, because the speakers have been here for 2 hours and I don't want to keep them waiting too long until we'll dive into these questions. So we've got a lot of questions here. I'm counting there over 50 questions there, but I'm going to go through some of the important ones, or the one I think our presenter will be able to do justice to, rather than just a political question. There's Engineer Obianugu Okushogun. You asked about 5 questions here. If you're still here, if you want to unmute yourself and just read out 1 or 2 of them, otherwise I will read them out for you.
You can read them.
Engineer Obianugu. Okay, thank you very much.
You can read them, but name, sorry, excuse me, Dr. Popola. My name is Obianuju, not Obianugu.
Obianuju. Sorry about that. Sorry about
that. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. That's why I pronounce it very slowly, not to get it wrong. Right. Okay. You have 5 questions there. Was there a project management team approved for the project? Was there a quality plan or the quality management system address all aspects of the work and the procedure? Was there appropriate supervision by qualified personnel? Was there compliance with the development procedure? Were the people on site qualified to carry out the work they were doing? I don't know if Engineer Kunle will be able to answer any of this question, unless you're a member of the construction of this particular building. I'm not sure. I mean, there's a signboard which I've got a picture of that tells you all the profession on this site, and some of them are even blank them out. Like the structural engineer, there's no name in there. There's a number, but there's no name. So you don't even know who the structural engineer based on the signboard that was done, that was put on the site. So Engineer Kunle, please, is it possible to address 1 or 2 of these questions?
Well, I think you are absolutely correct that these are questions that are going to come out from the panel. These will come out from the detailed investigation. So this is still quite early days, but these are questions that would normally be asked. There are actually about 100 questions that should be asked, from how many floors were approved to which engineer was on site at the time, to what were the consultants, why did this happen, why didn't that happen? But I think there will be a lot of answers that will come out. It's still too early, and Certainly, I don't have, my role here is just to talk. There are panels that have been set up by Lagos State government. There've been panels set up by Koren, by NSE, and I think more than likely, because so many deaths have been involved, there will be the coroner inquest, and a lot of questions will have to be answered. So for now, maybe we should just focus on the bits that we know.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Engineer David Amaku, you want to ask your question? David Amaku, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Sunday. It's actually been answered already, because I'd asked the question about whether the building codes included disproportionate collapse, and other people present have talked about that. So specifically, I don't know if it's considered within the Nigerian building codes, but I think the point I'd make is that even with disproportionate collapse, if there is poor control of materials on site, effectively the building's been compromised even before it's started performing in accordance to the design.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Engineer Debo Ainon, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? I know also you asked a lot of questions there, but I just want you to narrow it down to one or two, please. Engineer Ainon. All right, Engineer Jasper, I keep calling everybody engineers. I don't know if they are or not. Jasper, you asked a very pertinent question. If you're there, otherwise I'll say it out, which is a question that's on everybody's lip. That what will happen to the other two buildings? Are they going to be taken down? Engineer Kunle?
Yeah, thank you, my big guy, Jasper. That's a wonderful question. And you see, I think one of the things that these type of events happen is bring to the fore is that we should be asking questions. And I think for too long, we all get fascinated with who's to blame and, you know, who is fighting for what property and, you know, who said what on social media. But actually, those are major things. I mean, people in the area should be concerned. Everybody should be concerned. I would have expected, and I'm sure it is happening. I do have faith in the professionals within both government and others, that somebody will be talking about what measures can be taken just to avoid anything happening. As you know, with earthquakes, we have after waves. You just don't want to have a repeat. So if it is that, okay, as a temporary measure, let's just go in carefully, and I use the word carefully. Sometimes trying to do something can even cause, you know, make it worse, but carefully prop and make sure, or be monitoring. And the minute anything is starting to happen, you take the appropriate precautions. So it's a very, very good question, which the general public is quite right in wanting to know. Have the same errors been repeated in the other blocks? And even if the other ones were fine, what has the effect of 21 solid, you know, slabs of a building coming down within seconds and causing significant waves within the area? People talk about feeling it was an earthquake. So those are very relevant questions. Again, I'm only here to talk about what I know, but yeah, those are the type of questions that should be asked, and I'm confident that some of the engineers within government are actually talking about that. If they aren't, they can always come to the private sector to you know, judge and make sure that we don't end up with an embarrassing situation on our hands.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go on to the people who have raised up their hand. I've seen quite a few hands coming up now. Engineer Ademola, your question, please. Please, your question could be directed to any of the speakers. It doesn't have to be Engineer Kunle.
Well, this has been a very insightful discussion. And and I appreciate what you experts are able to put on the table. Mr. Adebajo, this is Ademola Ogunfolo on the line. I'm not stalking you, but please make sure you reach out to me.
My dear Gon, you can never stalk me.
I said I'm not stalking you.
I
also
know.
saw Annette Fisher there. Hello, Annette. We go way back to secondary school, but I think this is a very insightful dialogue, and I wish you guys well. Thank you.
So Engineer Ademola, sorry, I need to unmute this guy. So Engineer Ademola, obviously you're just making a comment there. You didn't have any question. That's good. I like people like you. Engineer Isaac Alade, please.
I am not an engineer. I'm just an ordinary man. But
sorry.
I'm happy that you were able to let me participate in this dialogue here. Thank you.
No problem. You're most welcome. Engineer Isaac Alade, please.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Engineer Adebajo, God bless you. You had a very good presentation there. And one of your boys from Mikeja speaking now. I'm pleased for Port Harcourt, Nigeria. I think there is now need for what NSE have been pushing along with Korean, that all the upcoming artisans, technicians, all these guys that are down below the engineers, focus on the engineers alone. But you can be sure that most of the so-called artisans that work on this building, they are not trained. Most of them may not even be trained. They are just guys gathered together from someone that brought them, okay, this guy can plaster, this guy can lay blocks and so on like that. So this level of artisan masons, there is need for their education. And that's where the issue of vocational education that NSE has been pushing comes in. We need to speed up on this. Technical schools need to be revived in Nigeria, where these guys can get adequate training. And also talk about needs now for NSE and Korean to come together to begin to have a means of forcing the government to do the right thing. What do I mean? I mean, we need for us to create a website where engineering companies and personnel can be blacklisted and posted on the website. And when they are posted there, nobody can employ them for any job in Nigeria. Then people will begin to fear that don't spoil my career. We need to start that now in Nigeria. Many guys that are heading these companies that are doing bad road jobs that are spoiling within a year, they are still there walking around, heading companies, heading big businesses. Let's have a website. Companies can be blacklisted, posted there for the whole world to see. They've done a bad job and they can never get a contract in Nigeria again. Personnel also for engineering practice, they've done a bad job, blacklisted, pasted there. I think we need to start that now in Nigeria. I think that's my contribution.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Let's now go onto the chat room here to see if there's any relevant questions for the other speaker as well, because I know they're eager to answer questions here. Engineer, I know ask some questions here, but it's not here to support those questions. Some of those questions also have been answered. You know, he's an architect and he's asking questions about the role of engineers and all kind of things, which we've spoke about quite a lot today. I wanted to put it to Engineer Rose Madaki in terms of standards. I know that you mentioned quite a lot of things about reinforcement. What was SON doing in terms of keeping eye on the quality of reinforcement that is coming to our country or even manufactured in our country? Engineer Madaki.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. We have put regulation in place for products that are coming outside the country. The ones that are being manufactured in the country, within the country, we have regulations for them. So if they are coming outside the country, we have a process called SONCAP, Standard Organization of Nigerian Conformity Assessment Program. This process is put in place to check the quality of the product that is coming into the country. So we have regulatory agencies that carry those responsibility on our behalf to check the quality of those products vis-a-vis the required standard and ensure that this product meets the Nigerian industrial standard before they are allowed into the country. So people don't follow that route to go and check, meet this inspection, and just check the product before bringing them into the country. And that is why we have flooded substandard goods into the country. And for those people that manufacture within the country, that is in Nigeria, we have a process in place for them called Manufacturer Association of Nigeria, mandatory conformity assessment program for people that are producing locally in Nigeria. And that was why I initially said, for steel bars, reinforcement bars that are being manufactured in Nigeria, we have standards for them. And standard organization regulate them, they check them minimally 4 times in a year. So there is no way we will produce substandard or less quality, required quality of such product and we will be allowed to circulate it into the Nigerian market. It is not possible because we ensure that your product are traceable to you. So if you find out those things, we'll definitely trace them to you. Then lastly, I want to put this across to you, Engineer Popola. This particular aspect of, segment of program is coming in at the right time. You and I are in court and standard. This was what we've been advocating for in the court and standard committee, that Nigerian engineers, we know the things that are peculiar to our environment. We should come up, let me say this, it's not based on inferiority complex with the people in diaspora. Thank God we've been having this collaboration with the engineers in diaspora. We never had this before in NSE. Now we have a link between Nigeria and then the NSE in diaspora. You are well exposed or you have privileged information or equipment or ideas or information more than we hear. So you are to transport that to us there. We should look forward, Engineer Popol, I am putting this across to you, that Nigeria must come and Nigerian engineers must come out with court of practice for Nigerian development of structures such as this. If you are developing 1 floor, 2 floor, 30 floor, etc., you have to have a court of practice. These are the basic requirements we need. If we have this in place, we legislate them, collaborate with SO as we always advocate. Then we'll come up with these standards. Before you put all these structures in place, the 2 meet these requirements, we have them, we give it to them. For any obras, any building that we have, every engineer on site must have this document. Then we can now check the 2 meet all these requirements. These are the things that we Nigerians engineers are supposed to develop. Cost and standard is not for a standard organization does not produce anything. We are to come up with all the things that we want. Then they will legislate. They are just a hope for us to now advocate and then develop our standards. So if we can come up with the things that we need, we meet them because they are the regulatory bodies, then we now have everything that we need before any development of any structure. These are the things that we need because I wrote some certain things. And then for Koren has to come in. Koren has to be sure that all companies that carry out such engineering projects must be regulated and registered with them. And there must be consequences. If such a project collapses, there must be consequences. And they must make sure they register them and evaluate them. Yes, we know we have such in place with Koren, but how frequent do they regulate? Do they evaluate them?
Thank you.
All the while they have registered them. You have information about. So we need to take up that responsibility as engineers. We should stop talking too much. We should be active.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious that my baby is wanting some food there in the background. So please make sure that baby gets plenty of food. Thank you very much, Engineer Rose. I really appreciate you. I'm going to give other people the opportunity now because this seminar or webinar is attracted people from all kind of professions. They're not just engineers. One of them is Mr. Abiola Koshegbe, who I believe is a lawyer.
She's an engineer.
An engineer. Oh, sorry.
Let me introduce Engineer Abiola Koshegbe properly. She's the permanent secretary of Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development here in Lagos State. So she had even dropped so many comments on the chat box, but she had said it that she would like to mention a few of it. So here we meet with
yes,
Dr.
Engineer Kushebe, I believe we've met already, actually. Now that I'm seeing your page now, I think we met over the summer too. Anyway, go ahead, unmute yourself and share your experience with us, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. It's been a very enlightening program, and obviously without, I'm not able to talk about the collapse because obviously we are involved when it comes to the inquiry. However, having listened to a lot of what everyone has said, Engineer Adebajo, well spoken. One of the things that I just want to mention is that from the time that I got to the Lagos State Building Agency, and even Engineer Shodende, who is online here, we have really tried to introduce a lot of things. Let me just enlighten everyone that even though the Lagos State Building Control Agency was set up in 2012, the agency was, let's say, the government of Mr. Ambode was actually the one that eventually employed architects, engineers, and builders in 2017 to the agency. Before then, the agency was fully staffed by town planners. Obviously, the issue of building control in Nigeria is something that is progressing. If we look at a lot of states, I believe Lagos State is probably the only state that actually has a building control agency. In the last year or so, the ministry and its agencies, we have in the last year or so, the ministry and the agencies, we've been working on full automation. I believe Mr. Ty Davis mentioned something about a website and all that. So we've actually been working on full automation where all the agencies are on one platform. And so when an application comes in, all the agencies that are expected to know that there's something going on are notified. And throughout the process of that construction, the officers are expected to follow the process. One of the most important things that will happen with that is tracking, because the platform will actually be linked even to Mr. Governor, to Mr. Deputy Governor, the Honorable Commissioner. Everyone will be on that platform. And we're able to track applications, we're able to track delays, we're able to track whatever is going on in the process section. When it comes to building control also, a particular project, once it's approved, from the side of the building control, you'll be able to apply for a date for inspection, we'll be able to know who and who is going on site, everything. So we're currently working on that. And obviously, it's come too late for this particular project, but obviously the way it is, it's progress in the right direction. The other thing that we've done, and a lot of the divisions, let's say, not the branches, but the divisions of NSE in Lagos will collaborate, we've been collaborating with them. We have been having meetings on how to progress with monitoring and enforcement of building control issues. Some of the things that we suggested also, like it's been put on the platform, has been registering companies and individuals that can actually do this work. So these are some of the things that we have been working on. It is rather unfortunate. We all know we have a lot of people have experiences abroad. They have, even if you don't have experience abroad, you know people that have who work abroad and who give a lot of information on what steps and what steps we need to take in the right direction. And so a lot of these things we are and have been working on. Our full automation process we were meant to actually do a test run in December. Obviously, we're a little bit behind schedule, but we are working on it. And so talking also about employment of companies that are experienced in structural design. These are a lot of things that the state government has been looking at. Without like I said earlier, without wanting to say anything about the building collapse, I'm just referring to the initiatives that the state government has been working on. We continue to work with professionals. As far back as 2 years ago, we held a meeting even with the current ERM members, where we talked about how we can move forward, especially with monitoring, enforcement. And I think that at the end of the day, you know, I've been on so many WhatsApp platforms where, because of the collapse, a lot of our colleagues, because we are all members of professional bodies, and as far as I know, I don't think any professional body has actually dismembered any of their members, even when previous buildings have collapsed, which current can actually do. So I think we should look positively and profile solutions that are proactive and will help the industry. How pointing fingers at officers of building control and saying they collected money, but it takes two to tango. If you know you are doing the right thing, don't pay anybody, right? And at the end of the day, if you go to a site where an engineer is supervising, because building control is not supervising, you are expected to be the engineer that is supervising on site. Do the right thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that we
can all move forward. Going on WhatsApp platform, insulting the building, insulting government officials and things is not going to help. We are all members of the same professional body. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your contribution there. And some of the things you said the Lagos State are doing, we'll take note of that. We at the London branch, we are also putting a mini report together. Not looking at the failure itself, but looking at the long-term thing that we could do, we could put in place to make sure I won't say design to prevent loss of life. I used to say to young people, engineers save more life than medical doctors. But since last week, I couldn't say it without having to question myself. Is that the case? You know, so we'll be writing to you very, very soon. And talking about other profession, I've got I'm not going to use the word engineer this time. It's a surgeon, Funsho Oluwole. You want to share your view with us, please? Funsho Oluwole, are you still there? Probably not. Okay, let's go back to the people who have raised here. I'm going to wrap this up in another 10 minutes. Jamil Aziz, please post your question, please. Unmute yourself and post your question. Jamil Aziz.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Evening.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes, very well.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Engineer Jamil Aziz. MNICE. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my question is to the admin of the program. I thank you for this opportunity. I would like to know if there will be a transcript distributed to participants. That is the recording of this program. So there are some of us that were having network issues that we made.
Yes, we've recorded it, and we will post it widely when the Zoom allow us to download the recording. Yes, thank you.
All right. So
right. Engineer Momo Omokafe, please.
Yeah. Good evening.
Evening.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah, I actually have a first, or let me say second-hand experience on that building that collapsed in Ikoyi. But there's something I actually want us to look at. I was there. I mean, I got there maybe around 3 o'clock, and the thing happened around 2. It's not far from my office. One thing I actually want us, before I continue, thank you, Engineer Rose, my former chairman, the appointed woman. You guys, we are really doing us proud. Yeah. What I'm saying is that we didn't care to look at what the engineers are actually going through. We saw that man on national TV saying it doesn't obey engineers again. I'm sorry, yes, it's late, but I just want us to treat it from the roots. The man said is that he used to obey engineer, used to obey consultant. He doesn't do that again. The Nigerian system we have, the system we have in Nigeria, an engineer can work under an accountant and he will be receiving instruction from that accountant. I was working in an organization, I don't want to mention the name, in 2018 as a project manager, and I went to the site only to discover that the second floor, they are carrying load to pass second floor. They are not, I stood on, they have to brace this place so that it will not fall. And that is my offense. And I was sacked for it. Today, by God's grace, I am a contractor. There are some places, there are some quotation you will give. Only for you to discover, they will tell you, Oga, it's too high. I did a plinth for somebody last year, this year. The same plinth, he want to repeat it. I said, oh God, this is the cost. He said, no. And the man went ahead and did it with almost half of my cost because he didn't employ any structural engineer around him. I am not a structural engineer.
Thank you.
So please, let us look at it as a whole, not saying the side of structural engineering. Let us look at it as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's in the same light of what people have been saying, that engineers are not paid very well, they're not respected, and every dick and Harry call themselves engineers. That's one of the reasons why I don't like using the word engineer. I'm sorry to say, guys, I don't like using it at all. I'd have, just call myself Sunday Popola than put the word engineer in front of my name. But people, they've learned, they've went to university, trained for it, so you deserve to be called. And you have to make sure we change people's perception that people who are truly engineers should be called engineers. So when the situation comes, just like a medical doctor. They're there and they're well trained before they become medical doctor. They don't just call themselves medical doctor because they're a doctor. So we should try and change people's mindset so that people will understand the liability, responsibility of calling themselves engineer. Engineer Nzinwa Victor, please. Nzinwa Victor.
Okay. Well, good evening now.
Good evening.
I really want to appreciate all the panelists. They had all done justice to this subject. So I want to speak on the area of integrity testing. Because I
prefer if you ask a question, if you don't mind. We're running out of time.
Okay. Well, actually, my area of interest is on the integrity testing because I discovered that a whole lot of engineers, they don't ascertain the integrity of their materials used. They don't. And when you ask, they will tell you that the cost of testing is very high, that they know the quality of the materials that they are using. Hence, they don't need to go conduct any of such tests that requires money spending. So I think in that area, NSE has to look into it, see on how to encourage engineers to conduct tests in order to ascertain the integrity of materials used for building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that contribution. Yes, that's very important, especially if you're using the material in an area where you're not sure of the safety factor associated with it. Yes. Thank you. Engineer Peter Fisher, please.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, just simple couple of observations. Thank you. This has been an excellent presentation. Just a couple of things. I think everybody is missing something. This collapse, as terrible as it was a blessing in disguise. It's a wake-up call to everybody. Imagine if this had happened 2 years from now with the building occupied. This would be our Florida. This would be our Florida. Second thing, I think this is a wake-up call for everybody involved in the building industry in Nigeria, not just government, private sector, everybody, because it's not impossible that the problem is the lack of, the regulators, do they have the tools to do the analysis, proper assessment of the design of this kind of building now? They rely on the consultants to provide them I doubt that they do the assessment of the analysis themselves. And lastly, the way this building came down, if you didn't know, you would have thought it was a controlled demolition. If you didn't know, that must be a clue to what happened. because to do an assessment for controlled demolition is very complex, very, very complex. And now, as Engineer Adebajo said, the earthquake tremors that were felt, that whole area, there needs to be long-term assessment of a lot of the surrounding buildings. And if those two buildings are allowed to go forward and be occupied, they have to be looked at for years, because you don't know that weight, 21 floors collapsing in such a concentrated space. Who knows what the effect will be long-term, and especially after the buildings get loaded. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, that's very, very important. As we all notice, it's not even loaded. You should be able to carry itself weight. It's like every one of us walking around, our leg is carrying our weight. If our leg can't carry our weight, we can't walk around. So that's basically what we thank God that the building hasn't been occupied. So, people still die, but not many that will have if the building was occupied. There's a question there which I wanted to pose to Engineer Ojelade. What's your thought about whistleblowers? In the UK, we use whistleblower quite a lot. People actually pay to be whistleblowers, where they'll find something wrong and they will go and quietly report it. What's your view on in Nigerian establishing a culture of whistleblowers?
Well, I think it's a good idea, especially because these things keep happening. And even when it happens, you see that someone along the line had seen that something was being done that was wrong. So if such an avenue exists, such a person will be encouraged to blow the whistle and say, I can see what they are doing on this site, it's not right. Whether the person doing it is an engineer or not, it doesn't matter. But that something is being done here and I've noticed it and it's not right. There are cracks already that they are blowing, they are covering it up, they are using this or they're using that. I think it's going to be a way that that we can go forward. But even more importantly is the consequences, that need to be borne. We need to ensure that consequences are in place and they are enforced. Not a situation where somebody blows the whistle, then at the end of the day, the person begins to blame himself because it's the one that bears the consequences of whistleblowing.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Engineer Tai Fadikpe, you wanted to make a contribution there?
Yeah, thank you. On that same topic, while it's still fresh, I wanted to just quickly add, there is a kind of whistleblowing already going on. So with the coming of social media now, you see people now being more aware, reporting things on Facebook. But as a body, NSE and Korean, what we can do is, on our WhatsApp group where we chat, the London and the Manchester one, we have this now saying about an initiative like see it, say it, report it. We can create a small portal. So the average man on the street posting on his Facebook profile or Instagram is getting somewhere, may not go as far, but we are a strong voice here. If we channel all those videos to a small portal we create on our NSE website or the global NSE website, see it, report it. You see any bad practice, report it, get the details, and then we can track. I think that might be something that will help us going forward. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. The other thing that one of our speakers mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I'll get him to come back on it now. The use of AI. Engineer Moses, you're saying that if this is going to be a regular thing, is it possible to use machine learning and AI to track this thing and predict when this thing is likely going to happen and we can avoid it? Can you, share some light on that? Engineer Moses, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
No.
Yeah,
Yes.
when I speak in the context of machine learning, was about learning from past experiences as to why we've had so many building collapses. So that would help you know what is responsible and how you can avoid it.
So do you think it's something Nigeria will benefit from?
I think any nation will benefit from it, not just Nigeria. Yeah. Hello?
So are you able to put a proposal together, a one-pager that we could then post to the several state government or NSE or Korean to see how this thing could work and we could start working on it? because I use AI a lot. I use machine learning a lot in predicting all kinds of things, and it's working fantastically. But I've never used it on building collapse.
Yeah, we can do something about that. But I want to speak to an issue about those two existing towers, whether they need to be pulled down or not pulled down, because it borders on structural integrity management. Now, the issue of the building collapsing and shaking the ground is pertinent, but that you can address by undertaking new geotechnical investigation to know what could have happened to the soil. And if all the issues concerning the change management are addressed, then one will be able to know exactly what those two towers were designed for and whether the foundations are adequate. Once you address the fact that the foundations were adequate, you can then begin to do actual structural integrity monitoring of the structure itself. I know it may be unsafe, but they are non-destructive techniques, like how you can tell how many reinforcement exist in the building that has been constructed. So the technology exists. You can even do, I suppose this is pretty mundane, you could do maybe leveling survey and see whether the building is inclined. So there are steps you can take before you decide whether to demolish a building or not. So for me, that's just, I think, are necessary steps to be taken before you just embark on maybe just demolishing the buildings because a building nearby collapsed that may not have tampered with the integrity of the existing buildings. I don't want people what I'm saying, don't speculate that the materials are substandard, even if they are, like Engineer Rose is talking about incorrect reinforcement placing, techniques like using profometer. We easily tell you whether if a slab was designed for reinforcement to be spaced at 200 mm, they are spaced at 300, you know there's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Couple more people are raised up a hand. I'm only going to allow 2 more people, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. Engineer Kunle Adebajo.
Thank you very much, everyone. I want to appreciate the organizer of this program. It'll be quite enlightening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. I want to come up with the issue of integrity. Is it possible? Because this recent collapse, we heard that the engineer in charge abandoned the project at the point in time because the developer will not listen to him anymore or them anymore. Is it possible for us to have a feedback system? If an engineer says, on this site, I will continue with this project, is there a way of feeding back current immediately? When you write the owner of the project, the owners, they also copy current, you copy NSE, whatever, so that they know that you are no longer there before anything evil happens. We should not, well, whistleblowing is good. I mean, it should continue. I mean, it should be encouraged. But what I'm saying is that before something bad happens, you as an engineer should have said, no, I can't continue this way. I've done that before a few times. I won't continue with this project anymore. Then you inform the bodies concerned, so they will know. When developers know that engineers will have to report immediately when they abandon the project, this issue of substandard projects supervision will just reduce, if not completely eliminated. Because automatically, when I abandon a project as an engineer, current will have been formed, NS will have been formed. I've sent out signals already for them to know that, I mean, that's a feedback system. So there should be a feedback system. If I abandon a project and nobody knows about it, I could also, as a developer, I can get another engineer to continue the project. And the nonsense continues.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The last person that I'm going to allow to speak is Architect Annette Fisher. You've been discussing quite a few things on the chat, and I just want you to share some of them with us. Annette Fisher, are you there? My sister. I think she must have gone. What? Olumayowa Ogunoye, Engineer Olumayowa Ogunoye, please unmute yourself.
I am here, but I don't have any questions. I've just been listening to the conversation, so thank you.
All right, no, I just some of the things you're saying here are just very interesting. That's why I thought maybe you want to share some of it with us.
No, I just think.
Your mic is unaudible. Well, Olumayowa, go ahead. Engineer Olumayowa, go ahead, please.
Good day, everyone. Hello.
Good evening. Yeah.
Hello. Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma. Yeah, I really appreciate this program. It's quite inspiring, enlightening, and eye-opening. There's something I experienced not quite long. I'm deployed from Ministry of Agency, Lagos State Building Control Agency, to Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. So there was this project that we had in what's it called, in Aja. So when I got to the site, I was looking from afar. Then I moved closer. Then the mixed ratio they were using 1 pan of cement to 5 pan of sand and 5 pan of granite. At times the granite is even 6. So I had to go and meet the engineer to report them. And then when they got there, on getting there, they switch up the mixer, the machine. Not, I think, few minutes when I got there. And I just want to reference this to some of the building projects. For instance, let's assume a project is contracted to someone like an estate, and the people there, there's no neighboring, there's nobody around that can actually that will see what is going on there. And you see somebody, I'm just talking about the management of materials, where somebody will, I don't know what really happened, but if some people can do this just to minimize cost, probably the contractor might not even have an idea of if such is going on the site. So I think everybody in the building industry, there's need for sensitization. It's not only that probably they're putting the blame on engineers. If such can even be done to reinforcement as well. So there's need for reformation, sensitization, and so for people who are not engineers that are into the system, they also need, there's a way we should find the system or the body in charge should do something about it. I think it will really help us.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you for everybody that participated in this. We had over 200 at one point. So I'm going to pass the baton back to my chairman, Engineer Tio Odunlami, to say the last words, and then we'll close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Dr.
And
Sunday
thank you
Popola, is it possible, just before the chairman, just to make one quick comment so that we go away with that? I've been very, very impressed with the quality of questions, but I just thought that the issue of the other 2 blocks, please let us understand that the work of structural engineers is not to necessarily bring up and down buildings, but also to preserve. All that would be required once detailed investigation is carried out is to see what the effect on the building is and to see how it needs to be strengthened or what needs to be modified in the building. So we shouldn't look at the newspaper saying it's going to be pulled down. Nobody is talking yet about pulling down. What one is talking about is taking due cognizance of what this structure has gone through and then taking the necessary well-designed engineering steps. So I just point that out so that we don't get unduly carried away with either the whole thing goes down or up. In some cases, we may just simply say, look, because of the defects in the building, reduce the number of floors, and this building will no longer be 15, it will be 11 or whatever. Just like in the medical field where you don't amputate at every single thing. Instead, sometimes you would have to do a little bit more of preservation. Thank you. And it's been a great pleasure listening and speaking today. Thank you very much.
Well, what can I say but to just say thank you to everybody. I want to use this opportunity to just thank our able panelists, the chief speaker, Engr Adebajo. I really appreciate your diligence in tackling this topic. The upwent president, I definitely would like to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here. Engineer Rose Madaki, I want to commend the work you are doing on behalf of the NSC on the standard organization and codes for department, and you've done a very good job, and we can see the results of all these things coming up. But one thing I want us to take home, apart from everything that we have just said, is the fact that the backbone of a successful project delivery is everyone going back to their family safely. Any project that does not guarantee that definitely has some questions to answer. And I think the responsibility is not on the engineers or the property developer, it's on everybody, even the neighbors. For example, the people that definitely lost their lives, I mean, may their souls rest in peace. Not all of them were maybe workers on the site. Some of the people that came to sell stuff and stuff like that. So it could be anybody. So these are the things I want us to understand. And one of the things that we need to now begin to imbibe in construction in Nigeria is health and safety. I don't think we have a kind of robust health and safety executive regime or strategy on our structures, maybe sites in Nigeria. And those are the key whistleblowers in UK, the health and safety guys. They are the key whistleblowers. If they see you, either you're not putting on the right PPE on site, they will definitely blow whistle on you. They can even tell you to stop on site if things are going wrong, as it were. So if our health and safety executive on site seeing somebody chipping away at a column, wow, stop that job. So stop it. Everybody just shut down. And that is it. So these are some of the things that we from NSE London UK branch, we are going to make recommendations. This is not just a kind of maybe that's the end of the story. No, it's just the beginning. A communique recommendation list or strategy is going to come out from this particular forum, imbibing everything that we have learned today. And we are going to make our case maybe as a kind of suggestion. This is the way forward. And not only that, we are going to put our mouth we're going to put our hand where our mouth is. We're going to make ourselves available. And you can see we have a pedigree of intelligent guys who can do the job here. We're going to make our services available for anyone that wants us to look at that. And that is why I want us to look at the case of the third party. There must be a third party stance in all these things. Someone to act as an arbiter, someone to act as somebody looking from the flanks. The wingman is quite independent from the structural engineer or the developer. He is the one supposed to see that everything I have to certify these ones. Life is very crucial. It could be anybody, it could be anybody's mother, father, brother, husband involved in all of those things. So that is one thing we need to look at, and it's taking us forward. And last but not the least, I want to say thank you once again for everyone that has been on board. We are down to 100 now, even after 2.5 or 2 hours or going more. But I want to say this is not the end of it. If there's anything you want us to do from NSE London UK branch, give us a shout. Give us a shout, and we are ready to support. I want to say thank you very much, and God bless you. Have the rest of the wonderful weekend. God bless. Speak to you later.
We would love to have some of our members to stay behind because we wanted to share our new website with you. Everybody else, if you want to hang around, fine. If you don't want to, you're welcome to go and have that pounded yam and the 4-euro. NSE London UK member, please just give us another 5 minutes. We wanted to share our brilliant new website with you and some of the things we've been doing over the summer. So
thank you very much.